Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. To bring in the movie of What If Lincoln Loud had a Digimon. Link down in the description of the fan fiction of this, What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this isn't a scam. Chapter 1. Lincoln lies in a bed in the garage, why? Well, after Lincoln forced to come to their game, then labeled him as bad luck, it escalated a bit. First, Lincoln played with the bad luck idea because he wanted to have some free time, only after a while did his family stop bringing him to their activities, after which they sealed his room and let him sleep outside until about a week ago since he has persuaded his family that he can sleep in the garage. The only problem is that the garage is not really tight, cold air comes in every time. Lincoln only gets the leftovers from the food and he is not driven to school but he has to walk. Lincoln lies on the bed, using his cell phone, watching videos and listening to music. He does not really pay attention to anything until the screen of his cell phone starts to light up, and he gets sucked in. His cell phone lands on the bed, and no one has noticed that something has happened. Lincoln lies in a small clearing in a forest, his eyes are closed and one hears a groan from him. He opens his eyes and sees where he is. Lincoln freaks something out and says, "Where am I?" Lincoln looks around until he hears a rustling. He looks in the direction of the rustling and expects the worst but nothing happens. From the shrubbery comes a strange animal out in a bad condition. Lincoln runs immediately and kneels and says, "What happened to you?" To Lincoln's surprise, the beast could speak. It says, "I've raided." Lincoln just does not care that the animal could speak, but rather that the animal is well again. He asks, "Where is the next city?" or something like that. The animal says, "In the direction." Why? Lincoln picks up the animal and makes his way in the direction of where the animal has shown. Lincoln arrives at something village-like, and sees a lot of weird creatures, but he just does not care. He goes to the next possible being and asks, "Sorry." The creature looks at Lincoln. It is a creature standing in flames. It says, "Man, that was a long time ago, when I saw a human." The creature watches Lincoln until his eyes fall on the animal, saying, "This is Vajramon, what happened?" Lincoln says, "It fell down somewhere, can you take me to anyone who can help?" The creature nods and says, "Follow me." They both go quickly to a hut and the creature opens the door and says, "Vajramon, we need you." Some kind of snowman comes into the room and sees the animal in Lincoln's arms. The snowman goes to Lincoln, takes the animal and says, "I'll take care of it." Vajramon. LVL, champion. Type, Ice Snow. Attack, Sub-Zero Ice Punch. After a while Vajramon comes back and we sit down. Vajramon says to me, with a woman's voice, "Thank you for bringing Vajramon here, I'm Vajramon." The fire creature says, "And I'm Vajramon." Vajramon. LVL, champion. Type, Flame. Attack, Fireball. Lincoln nods and says, "I'm Lincoln Loud, it's a pleasure to meet you." Vajramon notices something and says, "You have no idea what's going on, right?" Lincoln nods and says something embarrassed, "Yes sir." Vajramon laughs lightly and says, "You do not need to call me sir, you're in Digital World, the home of Digimon, which means digital monster." Lincoln nods and Vajramon says, "It rarely happens that humans come to this world. When they come to this world they find a partner." Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, "A partner?" Vajramon nods and says, "A partner, a Digimon partner, the best friend ever." The three talk for a while, until the door opens and Vajramon comes out. It is bandaged and comes towards the three. It sees Lincoln and says in a female voice, "You're the person who helped me, thank you." Lincoln nods and Vajramon jumps on his lap and looks at him. It says, "I'm Vajramon and you are." Vajramon. LVL, in training. Type, Lesser. Attack, Shippo Swing. Lincoln says, "I'm Lincoln Loud, nice to meet you Vajramon." The four talk to each other until Vajramon asks, "Lincoln, if I may ask something?" Lincoln nods and says, "Just ask." Vajramon breathes in and says, "Why did you help Vajramon? A lot of them would just go away and leave it there, but you took it in your arms and ran here, why?" Lincoln gets a serious look and says, "Why I did that, because it was the right thing to do. I'm not interested in what others would do. I'm my own person and I cannot look at anyone being hurt and I know that I can do something." Vajramon smiles, Vajramon closes her eyes so that she smiles, and Vajramon rubs his head against Lincoln's belly. When Lincoln said that, his chest begins to glow, capturing the attention of those present in the room, and an orb flies out of Lincoln's chest. He has the urge to touch it and takes the orb in his hand and a device forms in his hand. Vajramon's and Vajramon's eyes wide as they both say, "A digivice." Lincoln looks at her confused while Vajramon looks at Lincoln with great pleasure. Lincoln asks, "A digivice?" Vajramon says, "A digivice appears when a human finds a partner." Lincoln asks, "Who is my partner?" Lincoln looks at the three and senses something when he looks at Vajramon. It says, "I'm your partner Lincoln, we have a connection." Lincoln smiles and says, "If that's the case." Lincoln hugs Vajramon and says, "Welcome partner." Vajramon smiles as Vajramon says, "Wait a minute, are we sure Vajramon is your partner? I do not want to be the spoilsport, but we should be sure." Lincoln says, "I feel it Vajramon," and my digivice responds to Vajramon. Vajramon sighs and says, "I cannot say anything against that." The four laugh until Lincoln thinks of something. He says, "I have to go home somehow, there's no way I can go back to the human world, right?" Vajramon says, "But there is, you can use electronic devices to do that, you can use my TV." Vajramon points to the other side and Lincoln sees a plasma television. He looks at Vajramon and she says, "What did you think, we have no television? We even get people channels in." Lincoln and Vajramon go to the TV and Lincoln asks, "How am I going to do this?" Vajramon says, "Show with your digivice on it and remember that you want to go back." Lincoln nods. Vajramon jumps on his shoulder and nods to Lincoln. Lincoln points with his digivice and thinks of the human world. Lincoln and Vajramon are sucked in and disappear. Lincoln lands on his bed looking for Vajramon but does not see it. He asks, "Vajramon?" Lincoln hears a voice from his digivice saying, "I'm here, Lincoln." Lincoln looks at his digivice and sees Vajramon in it. Lincoln says, "Wait a minute, I'll see if I can get you out of there." Lincoln presses the buttons until Vajramon comes out of the digivice. They talk to each other until they both go to bed and sleep. Chapter 2. Author Pav. Lincoln lies on his bed in the garage and sleeps peacefully. Next to him is Vajramon, who is also under the blanket. It's peaceful until Lincoln's alarm rings. Lincoln wakes up and disarms the alarm. He gets out of bed and stretches. Lincoln hears a yawn and sees Vajramon standing on the bed and stretching. Lincoln smiles and says, "Good morning Vajramon." Vajramon looks at Lincoln with tired eyes, a tired smile, and says, "Good morning Lincoln." Lincoln changes and Vajramon asks, "What's up Lincoln, why are you awake so early?" Lincoln replies, "I have to go to school." Vajramon turns his head in confusion and asks, "School?" Lincoln turns to Vajramon and says, "School is a place where people learn." Vajramon nods in understanding and asks, "What do I do while you're gone?" Lincoln thinks until he thinks of something and he says, "I can take you, but you have to be on digivice." Vajramon smiles and says, "This is not a problem." Lincoln smiles and continues to work until he hears a growl and sees Vajramon looking away a bit embarrassed and asks, "Lincoln, do not you happen to have something to eat?" Lincoln laughs lightly and says, "You do not have to be embarrassed, I still have some apples." Vajramon lets out a sigh of relief because her partner is so understanding. Lincoln puts a few apples on the bed and they start to eat. Both are eaten and set off, so Lincoln sets off and Vajramon is in the digivice hanging from Lincoln's pants. Lincoln arrives at school and already sees Vanzilla parked in front of the school and his sisters get off, at least the twins, Lisa and Lucy. Since Lincoln does not really want to have anything to do with them, but the girls do not want to have anything to do with him, so Lincoln just goes to school ignoring the four. At his closet, Lincoln whispers to Vajramon, "Vajramon, you must be quiet, I do not want to know any of you." Vajramon asks, "Why?" Lincoln replies, "Most would go nuts or they would try to steal you, I do not want that." Vajramon says, "I understand, I'm going to be quiet." Lincoln nods and sets off for class. The lessons were boring, but now is lunch break. Lincoln has gotten something to eat and sits down at the sticky table because no one really wants to deal with him. Vajramon notices this and asks, "Lincoln?" Lincoln looks at his digivice and says, "What is Vajramon?" Kyaroman looks Lincoln in the face and asks, why would nobody want to talk to you? Lincoln sighs and says, it's because of something my sisters believe it's my fault. Kyaroman turns her head slightly and asks, what's your fault? Lincoln shakes his head and says, I'll tell you later. Would you like something to eat? Kyaroman shakes his head and says, no, I can wait. Lincoln says, well, if you mean, I have to get some money, do you have an idea? Kyaroman narrows her eyes and thinks until she looks up and says, yes, in Digital World's Chinatown, there's a great restaurant that needs help from time to time, we can ask. The two talk quietly, they are looked at confused by a couple of girls sitting at a table next to them. One asks, is he talking to himself? Another girl says, I do not think so, do you see the thing in his hand? The first girl nods and says, maybe it's a cell phone. Meanwhile, Lincoln has finished his meal and is on his way to the next class. After school, Lincoln hastens to come home because he wants to get back to the digital world as soon as possible. Lincoln arrives at home and goes to the garage. He sits down on the bed, gets his phone out and shows his Digivice on the phone. He thinks of the digital world and is sucked into the phone. Lincoln appears in the village, from yesterday, and next to him stands Kyaroman. A TV was set up in the street since it became known that a human could come back. Lincoln and Kyaroman make their way to the digital world Chinatown and talk. Kyaroman asks, Lincoln, can you tell me now what your sisters think you are? Lincoln sighs and says, bad luck. Kyaroman turns her head slightly to the side and asks, what? Lincoln answers, well, some time ago, my sister Lynn, she was very athletic, had a big game and she forced me to come along. Only the problem was she lost, which meant that she called me bad luck. I have played at the beginning because I wanted to have some free time, but after a while my family ignored me and did not take me to any of the family activities. I know that I can be selfish, but I have seen my mistake, but they do not have theirs. They forced me to sleep outside. At least I could convince them that I'm allowed to live in the garage. I hope you're not thinking bad of me now. Kyaroman looks at Lincoln and says, I admit that was stupid what you did, but you saw your mistake. You're a great human, Lincoln. I do not want any other partner besides you. Lincoln stops for a moment and bends down to hug Kyaroman, saying, thank you. The two arrive at a gate and see the Chinatown of the digital world. They go in and see a restaurant with a sign saying, employees wanted. Lincoln and Kyaroman look at each other and nod to each other as they enter. An egg-like Digimon comes out of the kitchen and an animal-like Digimon also comes forward, and the both say, ah, the first customers today, good day. Lincoln raises his arms and says, no, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we're here for the job offer. The egg-like Digimon says, oh, if that's so, I'm Digivolution and that's Taperman. Digivolution. LVL, Ultimate. Type. Perfect. Attack. Nightmare Syndrome. Taperman. LVL, Rookie. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Nightmare Syndrome. Digivolution says, you can start today. If you do a good job, you will be paid. If you do bad work, you will not get paid, understand? Lincoln and Kyaroman look at each other for a moment, then back at Digivolution and nod. Digivolution says, well, put on an apron and get down to work. You'll take orders and bring food, and what are your names? Lincoln says, I'm Lincoln Loud. Kyaroman says, and I'm Kyaroman, his Digimon partner. Digivolution nods and you hear people approaching the restaurant. Digivolution says, it's work time. The time flies and the customers in the shop are satisfied, actually more than satisfied. The food comes quickly and there are no mistakes in the orders. Digivolution smiles, even if you cannot see it, his new workers are good for the customers. After a while, the restaurant closes and Digivolution approaches his new workers, saying, you were very good today, you deserve it. Digivolution gives Lincoln and Kyaroman $150 each. Lincoln looks incredibly at the money and says, is not that too much? Digivolution shakes his head and says, no, that's normal, personally I find it's not enough. There are still some dumplings, would you like them? Kyaroman nods and says, we gladly accept the offer. Digivolution gives the two a box, the two take it and make their way home. Back in the garage, they eat the dumplings and spend time together. The scent of the dumplings flies in the house and the Loud sisters who are sitting in the living room smell the scent of the dumplings and Lori says, okay, something smells literally amazing here. Luna says, maybe it's Pop's dude. At that moment, Lynn Sr. comes into the room and asks, do you smell it too? The Loud sisters look at him and Lori asks, wait, why does it smell so good here, but you are not responsible? Lynn Sr. shrugs and smells again, saying, it smells like it's coming out of the garage. Lynn Jr. says, I do not care how good this food smells, I'm not going in there. Lana says, are you sure, it smells really great. Lynn Jr. says, yeah, I'm sure it's just a trick. Meanwhile, in the garage, the dumplings of Lincoln and Kyaroman are eaten with great pleasure. Chapter 3. It's been a week since Lincoln and Kyaroman started working in Digimon's restaurant and they've been paid every day for their good work and now they have $700. The two of them are in the garage thinking about what to do the money. Lincoln is sitting on the bed with his arms crossed, his head tilted to the side and his eyes closed. He's thinking about what he and Kyaroman should do with the money until he says, Kyaroman, you might want something. Kyaroman looks at Lincoln wide-eyed and says, Lincoln, we've earned the money together, so I will not allow you to spend anything just for me. Lincoln laughs lightly and says, that's right, but we would not have that much money until you were not, so make a suggestion, maybe something we both like. Kyaroman thinks for a while until it says, how about a TV? Lincoln thinks for a moment and says, good idea. Lincoln takes out his computer and the two are looking for a TV. They are looking for a while, until they find a good, they order him and now have to wait. Time skip. A week later. A week later, Lincoln and Kyaroman are not home because they are shopping in the mall right now. Lincoln is in a changing room and puts on a new outfit. When he puts on the jacket he asks Kyaroman, how do I look, Kyaroman? Kyaroman says, you look great, Lincoln. Lincoln smiles and says, then I'll buy that, maybe from each piece, too, so I can change a bit. Kyaroman nods and says, good idea. Lincoln changes and asks, Kyaroman, do you want anything? Kyaroman shakes her head and says, no, at least not right now. Lincoln asks as he puts on his regular polo shirt, why not? Kyaroman answers, I'm still in training Digimon, if I become a rookie, I'll keep the rookie shape. At least that's the case with most of them who have a Digimon partner, and I do not want to buy anything now and then it does not fit anymore. Lincoln nods in understanding and says, how many LVL are there? Kyaroman responds, there's in training, rookie, champion, ultimate and mega. Lincoln says, I see. Lincoln takes his new clothes and takes out his Digivice. He says, sorry Kyaroman, but you have to go back. Kyaroman says, with a joyous voice, all right, do not worry, Lincoln. Kyaroman walks into the Digivice and Lincoln walks out of the cabin. He fetches another pair of pants and a shirt of the same kind and goes to checkout, just to see Carol Pingree as a cashier. Lincoln goes to the cash register and says, hello, Carol. Carol looks up and says, you're Lori's little brother, right? Lincoln nods and says, yes, that's me. Carol asks, so can I help? Ask her with a smile and Lincoln replies, yes, I want to buy those things. Lincoln puts the clothes and shoes on the counter and Carol eyes it critically and says, are you sure they're pretty expensive? Lincoln has a big smile on his face and says, this is not a problem. Carol shrugs her shoulders and scans the stuff, saying, that'll make $170. Lincoln gives her the money, she puts it in a bag and gives it to him. Lincoln thanks her and makes her way out, and goes to a smoothie store and orders 2 smoothies. As he waits, he is noticed by a few people. It turns out that they are girl Jordan, Kat and Molly. Jordan says, is that Lincoln over there? Kat and Molly look in the direction and see it's Lincoln. Molly says with a not nice voice, yes, that's him. Kat rolls her eyes and says, great, Mr. Bad Luck is going to destroy our day. The 3 look in his direction and see that he looks at his Digivice. Molly asks, what is he holding in his hand? Lincoln chuckles and that only makes the 3 ask more. Jordan says, wait a minute. Jordan gets up and makes his way to Lincoln. Lincoln does not notice her until she says, hey Lincoln. Lincoln looks up a bit surprised because he did not expect someone to talk to him. He looks up and sees Jordan standing there. He hangs his Digivice on his pants and says, hey Jordan, can I help you? Jordan shakes her head and says, no, I just wanted to ask what that is. She points to Lincoln's Digivice and Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, "Why do you want to know that?" Jordan scratching the back of his head and saying, "It just looks interesting, why are you so suspicious?" Lincoln shakes his head and says, "If you really want to know, it's something from Japan. I forgot the name, but it's a kind of MP3 player, and why I'm so suspicious, you should be aware." At that moment, the two smoothies arrive and Lincoln picks them up while his other hand is the bag of clothes. He leaves without saying goodbye to Jordan and sets off for home. Jordan just stands there. She has never seen Lincoln so cold. He is actually always a nice guy. Jordan goes back to Kat and Molly and the two ask, "What happened?" Jordan answers, "So he said that this thing is a kind of MP3 player." Molly raises her eyebrow and says, "There's more to it, is not it?" Jordan nods and says, "He was so cold towards me, and when I asked him why he was so suspicious, he said that I would know why." Kat says, "I wonder what he means." While Lincoln and Kyaroman are on their way home, a package arrives at Loud House. The supplier rings the doorbell and Lynn Sr. opens it. He says, "Can I help you?" The supplier looks at his clipboard and says, "Yes, I have a package for Lincoln Loud." Lynn Sr. raises an eyebrow and says, "Yes, he lives here." The supplier nods and shows his clipboard. He says, "Please, sign here." Lynn Sr. signs and the supplier pushes the packet in and leaves. Lynn Sr. watches the packet and wonders what's in it. Lori comes out of the kitchen and sees her father and the parcel. She asks, "Did you order anything, Dad?" Lynn Sr. shakes his head and says, "No, this is a Lincoln package." Lori raises both eyebrows and says, "Lincoln ordered something." The other girls and the mother seem to have heard it because they are going to the packet now. Lenny asks, "What do you think is in there?" Lori rolls her eyes and says, "Probably, just nerd stuff like comics or something." Lisa says, "I doubt that, big sister unit, by the size of the package." Luann says, "Why do not we open it?" Rita shakes her head and says, "No, even if your brother is bad luck, we do not have the privilege to open his personal belongings." Lola says, "Come on Mom, we'll bring it to the garage too, I mean what's so great in there?" Rita says, "No, we do not open it." Luna says, "See it so Mom, we'll help the little dude just unpack it." Curiosity slowly grabs Rita, but she shakes her head and says, "No." But then they stop tearing and see the packet opened by Lynn Jr. Rita says, "Lynn." Lynn answers, "As Luna said, I only help Stinkholm." Rita says, "Do not call your brother like that." Lynn Sr. puts his hand on his wife's shoulder and says, "Calm down, sweetheart." Rita sighs and says, "I do not think a little glimpse can hurt. Lori, Luna, could you get it out?" The two nod and Luna says, "And what Lincoln has ordered is." When she sees it, she can hardly believe it. She says, "It's a 55-inch, smart TV." Lola screams, "Where does Lincoln have the money to buy such a thing?" Rita looks at her husband and asks, "You did not give him that much money, did you?" Lynn Sr. shakes his head and asks, "And you?" Rita shakes her head too. Lori examines the TV and says, "How about we just keep it for ourselves?" Rita says, "Lori." Lori raises her hands in defense and says, "Mom, look at it, it's a waste for him alone. Our TV is old, we could give it to him and keep the TV here." Lynn Sr. puts his hand on his chin and says, "That's a good idea." Rita looks at her husband wide-eyed and says, "Lynn, how fair is that if we get the new one and he gets the old one?" Exclamation mark quote. Before Lynn Sr. could answer, the doorbell rings. He opens the door and sees Lincoln standing there. Lincoln asks, "Is my package here?" Lynn Sr. asks, "What kind of package?" Lincoln sighs and says, "See, I'm not stupid, so I clicked on the option to contact me when the packet is there and I got a piece of it here, so just give it to me." Lynn Sr. scratching the back of her head and saying, "Well, it might be we opened it." Lincoln raises an eyebrow and says, "What?" Lynn Sr. says, "We want to suggest something to you, we'll get the new one and you'll get the old one." Lincoln is not happy but keeps his cool and says, "So you want me to give you my new TV, for which I paid $450, and I'll get the old one from you, you can forget that." Before anyone could reply, Rita says, "That's enough, Lincoln, I'll help you get the TV into the garage." Lincoln says, "Thank you." So they both carry the TV in the garage. After putting the TV down, Rita looks around the garage. It's a lot cleaner than expected. She sees the bag on the bed and she sees that it's Lincoln's new clothes. She asks, "Lincoln, what's that on your bed?" Lincoln simply replies, "My new clothes." Rita raises one of her eyebrows and says, "New clothes, why?" Lincoln says, "Cannot I try something new?" Rita is not sure what to make of it. Where did he get all the money from? She asks herself. Rita asks, "Lincoln, where did you get all the money for it?" Lincoln replies, "I work after school, do not worry, I do not neglect the school." Rita asks, "Where are you working?" Lincoln replies, "In a China restaurant." Rita says, "I see." Lincoln says with a smile, "Thank you for being with me." Rita smiles and says, "Of course, Lincoln." It hurts Rita that her son is not in the house with the others, but she cannot do anything. Lincoln says, "Mom, I have to do homework, so can you please go?" Rita nods and says, "Of course, have fun doing homework." With that she leaves the garage and leaves Lincoln and Kyaroman alone in the garage. Chapter 4. Author Pav. It's been a day since the new TV was delivered, and today Lincoln has to go to school. He puts on his new clothes, takes Kyaroman into his Digivice and sets off. On the way he gets confused looks from other students who are also on their way to school. They have never seen Lincoln Loud in such clothes. Backpack on his back and Digivice hangs on his pants. He goes into class and sits down at a table behind. He was exiled because he is bad luck. Just as he waits for the class to start, Ms. Johnson comes into the room and says, "Hello class, we have a new student, her name is Stella." I know, I get Stella into the story very early, but my story, my rules, but if you see it on the positive side, you have more choices as to who should get together with Lincoln. A girl comes in the room. She has tanned skin, freckles and black hair that curls up at the back end with 2 strands of hair standing out. She says, "Hello, I'm Stella." Ms. Johnson looks around the room, looking for an empty seat. She sees one next to Lincoln. She says, "Stella, why do not you sit next to Lincoln?" Stella nods and says, "Okay." Ms. Johnson says, "Lincoln, raise your hand." Lincoln raises his hand and is looked at by almost all male evil. Lincoln is not interested in the evil looks that are thrown to him. Stella goes to the place, sits down. She turns a little to Lincoln and says, "Hello, I'm Stella." She holds out her hand and Lincoln shakes her, saying, "I'm Lincoln Loud, nice to meet you." Ms. Johnson clears her throat and says, "Let's start teaching then." Lincoln hears Kyaroman say softly, "Well, great." Lincoln chuckles, then focuses on the lesson. The lessons were actually good, if you ignore the evil looks that are thrown to Lincoln. The school bell is ringing and it's time for lunch. Stella wants to talk to Lincoln, but girl Jordan and a few other girls approach her and Jordan asks, "Hey Stella, would you like to eat with us?" Stella really wanted to ask Lincoln, but he's out of class, so Stella says, "Yeah, sure." The girls go to the cafeteria and look for a table. Some of the girls pick up their food from the backpack, others go and get something. As everyone sits at the table, Stella notices Lincoln sitting on a table, alone, asking, "Why is Lincoln sitting there alone?" Kat rolls her eyes and says, "You should stay away from him." Stella raises an eyebrow and asks, "Why?" Joy says, "Because he's bad luck." Stella asks, "Where did you get that from?" Girl Jordan says, "Of his sisters, do not get us wrong, he's actually nice, but sometimes he can." Quote. Joy says, "To be a complete idiot." Kat says, "A jerk." Molly says, "A bad luck charm." Stella asks, still raising her eyebrow, "What did he do?" Joy replies, "He once turned out to be a girls' professional and gave tips to boys. Because of him I had a frog in my hair." Kat says, "The same with me, only through him my hair was destroyed by one of his friends." Stella points to them and says, "Sounds to me more like, he wanted to help his friends to impress you." The two scratch at the back of the head and say, "Can be." Meanwhile, a table next to the girls, sitting Lincoln and looks at his Digivice and whispers, "Hey Kyaroman, we have today free, Digimon is on vacation, what should we do today?" Lincoln expects an answer, but it does not come. He looks at his Digivice and sees the Kyaroman left and right again and again. He asks, "Kyaroman, everything okay?" Kyaroman snatches out of her trance and asks, "What is it, Lincoln?" Lincoln raises an eyebrow and says, "I asked you what we should do today." Kyaroman says, "I'm sorry, but I have a bad feeling that something is going to happen. Can we stay here a bit longer today?" Lincoln says, if you say so, we'll wait, I trust you. Vajramon smiles and says, thank you Lincoln, I trust you too. Lincoln takes out a box and opens it to see some dumplings. Lincoln licks his lips and starts eating. After regular lessons, girl Jordan, Stella, Kat and Molly go to the gym. They go in and see Coach Pikowski. Jordan goes to him and says, Coach Pikowski. The coach looks at Jordan, smiles and says, hello Jordan, can I help you? Jordan nods and says, yes, we wanted to ask if we could use the gym for a round dodgeball. The coach puts a hand on his chin and says, okay, you're allowed to use it, I have a date. Kat asks, who is the lucky one? The coach smiles and proudly says, Nurse Patty, we go golfing and I have to go. The coach picks up his golf equipment and sets off on his way out of the gym. The girls say, good luck on the date. The coach turns around again and says, thanks, I must really thank Lincoln. He walks out of the gym and closes the door. Girl Jordan says, I'll get the balls. So Jordan goes to the balls while the others are sitting in the stands and on their cell phone. Actually everything is quiet until a light comes out of one of the phones. It's Kat's. She drops her cell phone and walks away from the bleachers. The others follow her. Jordan is now standing next to the others and they see something coming out of their cell phone. Jordan takes her hands off her friends and runs behind the stands. The girls look out to the side and see a strange creature coming out of the phone. It looks around with fear in the eyes. Stella says softly, help us somebody. Meanwhile, with Lincoln, he's waiting in the corridor until Vajramon says, Lincoln, I'm feeling something. Lincoln looks at his Digivice and says, where is it? Vajramon says, I'm not sure. As Vajramon said that, the Digivice displays a kind of compass, with an arrow pointing in the direction. Lincoln shrugs his shoulders and heads off. Lincoln arrives at the gym and walks in. He sees the Digimon, shuts the door and does a broom between the crooks so nobody will come in. Lincoln says, a Digimon, where does that come from? Vajramon says, Lincoln get me out of the Digivice. Lincoln nods and lets Vajramon out without knowing that the girls are in the room. Vajramon appears and says, what are you doing here? The Digimon looks to Vajramon, goes back and shivers. Lincoln looks at his Digivice and sees it shows info. Elecmon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Mammal. Attack. Super Thunder Strike. Elecmon runs at Vajramon, tackles it. Vajramon flies back and Lincoln catches it. It jumps out of Lincoln's arms and hits Elecmon with his tail, but it hardly does any harm. Lincoln says, Vajramon, I think it just scared. Vajramon nods, but is struck by an electric shock. Vajramon lies on the ground and Elecmon runs back to Vajramon. Lincoln sees this and runs and yells, no, Vajramon. A light dazzles everyone in the room. Plus, Lincoln hears Vajramon say, Vajramon Digivolve to, Vajramon gets longer and gets white fur. It says, Kudamon. Lincoln looks at his Digivice and sees the new info. 1. Oops. This image does not follow our content guidelines. To continue publishing, please remove it or upload a different image. Kudamon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Holy Shot. Lincoln smiles and says, whoa, okay Kudamon, you can do it, and do not forget, do not hurt it hard. Kudamon says, no problem, Lincoln. Elecmon runs towards Kudamon, but Kudamon fades and shouts, holy shot. Kudamon shoots a beam out of her mouth and hits Elecmon with it. Elecmon flies backwards into a wall and Kudamon and Lincoln walk towards it. Lincoln kneels and asks, did you calm down? Elecmon nods and says, yes, sorry, I was scared, I do not know where I am. Lincoln replies, you're in the human world, I can bring you back if you want. Elecmon nods and says, please, I apologize for attacking you. Kudamon nods and says, it's okay. Lincoln gets his phone and Digivice out and sucks Elecmon into his cell phone in the digital world. Lincoln picks Kudamon up and hugs it and says, you've done great, Kudamon. The two hug each other until they hear, Lincoln, what was that? Lincoln turns and sees Jordan, Stella, Kat and Molly. He asks, how long have you been here already? Kat says, all the time. Lincoln and Kudamon curse softly, damn. Molly asks, what was that, and what's the matter in your arms? Kudamon gives Molly a cold look as Lincoln says, "Look, it's better if you just forget what you've seen, I have to go too, so goodbye." With that, Lincoln walks with Kudamon in his arms and leaves the girls there with many questions. Chapter 5. Author Pav. Lincoln lies awake in bed thinking about what happened today. Kudamon lies next to him and asks, "Lincoln, is everything okay?" Lincoln sighs and lays his right arm over his sternum and says, "I'm thinking about what happened." Kudamon looks at him from the corner of his eye and asks, "Is it because of the Digimon that came here?" Lincoln shakes his head and says, "No, it's not just that, but also that the girls saw us, even though I told them to stay out of it." Kudamon says, "You do not expect that they're going to do that." Lincoln sighs and says, "You're right, they will not stay out, I just do not know what to do now." Kudamon gets up and walks over to Lincoln so he can see her, saying, "Lincoln, we can do it, we're friends, after all." Lincoln smiles and says, "True." Lincoln closes his eyes and Kudamon cuddles against his neck. The next day, Lincoln goes to school. Kudamon is in the Digivice and tries to think of something if the girls come to them. Lincoln is in the office and is in his locker room when Jordan, Kat, Molly and Stella confront him. Kat comes up to him and says, "Okay Lincoln, you cannot just let us down after what happened yesterday." Lincoln says without looking at her, "I told you to stay out of it." Molly says, "As if we can stay out of there after what happened." Stella says, "Lincoln, can you at least explain what happened?" Jordan says, "Yeah please, I was awake almost all night yesterday." Lincoln sighs and says, "Okay, I'll explain it to you after school." With that, Lincoln closes his locker and goes to class. He hears Kudamon say, "You've chosen wisely Lincoln." Lincoln sighs and says, "Thanks, even if I'm not sure." Kudamon says, "It'll be fine." Lincoln goes into class and sits down in his seat, trying to relax, which works, at least until he notices Stella sitting next to him. "Oh, yes, she's sitting next to me." Lincoln thinks to himself. The rest of the hours Lincoln was always curiously watched by Stella. It's lunchtime. Lincoln goes into the cafeteria and sits down. It is actually quiet until Stella, Kat, Molly and Jordan come to him. Kat says, "Okay Lincoln, explain it to us." Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, "I said, I'll explain it to you after school, it's lunch right now, so you have to be patient." Kat rolls her eyes and wants to leave. Jordan and Molly follow her, but Stella stays and sits down with Lincoln. Lincoln looks up and sees Stella sitting across from him, saying, "I will not explain it to you sooner than to the others." Stella sighs and says, "I'm not sitting here because of that, but because I find it ridiculous with bad luck, and I want to spend time with you." Lincoln smiles and says, "You're one of the first to think that way, thanks." Stella smiles and says, "Gladly." Lincoln pulls out a box and says, "Do you want something?" Stella looks at the box and asks, "What is it?" Lincoln opens the box and in it is rice and baked chicken. Stella looks at it and says, "Wow, did you do that?" Lincoln says, "I had some help." Lincoln thinks to himself, "Thank you Taperman." Stella takes a bite and says, "That's really tasty, do you want some carrot sticks?" Lincoln replies, "Sure." The two eat together and are looked at by other students who cannot believe that someone is sitting with Mr. Bad Luck. The last lesson is done and Lincoln is packing his stuff into his backpack when Jordan, Stella, Molly and Kat come up to him. Although Stella did not even have to go to him, she's sitting next to him. Molly leans on Lincoln's table and says, "So Lincoln, explain it to us now." Lincoln gets up and says, "Come with me." The four girls listen to what he said and follow him, behind the school, where no one is there. Lincoln faces the four and says, "So, what are your questions?" Jordan raises her hand and asks, "What were these monsters?" Lincoln says, "Those were Digimon, that's short for, digital monster." Kat asks next, "Where are they from?" Lincoln answers, "From the digital world." Molly asks next and points her finger at Lincoln, "But if they're digital monsters, cannot you just delete them like a file?" Lincoln gets a colder look and Jordan asks, "Lincoln, what about those looks?" Lincoln is shaking with rage and he says, "How dare you say that?" Molly says, "They're dangerous, I'm just worried about our safety." Lincoln says, "I've only known Digimon for 2 weeks, but one thing I've learned in any case is that Digimon are also living beings. They have to eat, drink, sleep, they may get hurt, they can love, they can do anything, so I do not want to hear anything like that you can delete Digimon. The four were a bit shocked, they have never seen Lincoln like that. He takes a deep breath and calms down. Kat asks, what is that on your belt? She points to the Digivice. I do not think it's an MP3 player, as you told Jordan. Lincoln picks up his Digivice and says, this is a Digivice, I got it when I found my Digimon partner, so I can travel between the human world and the digital world. Stella raises her hand and asks, your Digimon partner, was that sweet white animal from yesterday? Lincoln nods and looks around briefly, but sees no one. He presses a button and Kudamon appears around his neck. He says, this is Kudamon. Stella says, oh, so cute. Kudamon says to Stella, thanks. Kat goes back shocked and says, it can speak. Kudamon looks upset and says, of course I can talk, I'm not stupid. Lincoln strokes Kudamon and says, that's all I know. Jordan asks, really? Lincoln nods and says, really, what are you going to do now? You will not tell anyone, right? Kat says, no, I will not tell anyone. Molly says, me neither. Jordan says, I'm not telling anyone. Stella says with a smile, my lips are sealed. Lincoln sighs in relief and says, that's good. The girls say goodbye and leave. Lincoln goes too and he and Kudamon spend the day watching movies. Chapter 6. Author Pav. It's the weekend, and Lincoln and Kudamon are waiting for someone in the garage. Kudamon looks at the clock on the wall and says, she should be here soon. Lincoln nods and says, Stella should be here in 5 minutes. Why the two are waiting for Stella? That was so. Flashback. Lincoln and Stella are sitting in the cafeteria, at a table talking to each other. Stella looks at her food and it looks like she's thinking hard about something. Lincoln notices this and asks, what's going on, Stella? Stella looks up and says, I wanted to ask if I could come with you and Kudamon into this digital world. Lincoln looks at his Digivice and sees that Kudamon nods. He looks back to Stella and says, sure, you can come with me next time. Stella starts smiling and hugs Lincoln as she says, thanks. Lincoln blushes a little and says, Stella. Stella notices what she's doing and lets go of him quickly. She's a little red in the face. She asks, when am I supposed to come? Lincoln says, embarrassed, just come on Saturday morning. Come home to my house and knock on the garage. I live at 1216 Franklin Avenue. Stella nods and says, sure. Flashback end. A knock is heard at the garage door. Lincoln shows Kudamon to hide. Kudamon is hiding under the bed and Lincoln opens the door to see Stella and Girl Jordan. He raises an eyebrow and asks, Girl Jordan, what are you doing here? Girl Jordan scratching the back of her head and saying, Stella had mentioned that you both want to go into this digital world today, and I wondered if I could go with you. Stella grins nervously and says, I hope that's no problem. Lincoln shrugs his shoulders and says, no problem, come in. Girl Jordan and Stella come in and look around the garage. Lincoln closes the door and Kudamon comes out of hiding and jumps around Lincoln's neck. Girl Jordan turns to Lincoln and asks, why are you living in the garage? Lincoln looks at her and says, because my sisters think I'm bad luck. Stella asks with a worried look, that's why they dumped you in the garage. Lincoln scratching his head and saying, not really, I asked because I would have to sleep outside. Stella and Jordan gasp and say, you know that's illegal. Lincoln nods and says, I know, but I do not hate my family so much that they go to jail or are taken to other families. Girl Jordan and Stella look at him with a worried look as he sighs, then smiles again and says, let's go and hold on to my arm. Stella and Girl Jordan both hold an arm of Lincoln and he points with his Digivice on the TV and the four are sucked into the TV. The four land in the village and Stella and Girl Jordan realize what happened and look around. You are amazed to see so many different creatures or Digimon. Vajramon sees Lincoln and Kudamon and walks up to them. Girl Jordan sees him and says, Lincoln, a Digimon of fire is coming and going. Kudamon sees him in the direction and says, calm down, this is Vajramon, a friend of ours. Vajramon arrives and says with a smile, hello Lincoln and Kudamon, how are you both? Lincoln and Kudamon say at the same time with a smile, we're fine, Vajramon. Vajramon looks around and sees Stella and Girl Jordan. He says, more humans. Lincoln says, these are my friends, Girl Jordan and Stella. Vajramon smiles and says, hello, I'm Vajramon. He sees that the two are afraid and says laughing, You do not need to be afraid, I will not hurt you. The two seem to be frightened and say, hello, Vajramon. Vajramon says, well you see, you can do it. The two smile and look at Lincoln who gives them a thumbs up. Kutamon asks, hey Vajramon, what are you doing? Vajramon says, I'm looking for the little ones. Lincoln gets an idea and asks, can we come with you? Vajramon says, sure, the little ones will be happy to see you. Stella asks with a puzzled look, the little ones. Kutamon answers, in training Digimon. Lincoln continues, they love to play with us, let's go. Vajramon, Lincoln, Kutamon, Stella and girl Jordan are walking in a meadow where many are little Digimon. The little ones see Lincoln and Kutamon and say, Lincoln and Kutamon are here. They run to them and knock them over. Lincoln and Kutamon laugh while the little ones jump on them, Stella and girl Jordan, smiling at the sight. Lincoln stops laughing as best he can and says, people, we have guests. The little Digimon look up and see Stella and girl Jordan. They jump down from Lincoln and say, even more humans. The little Digimon go to the two and the two scream. They say, oh, you are all so cute. Lincoln gets up and says, guys, introduce yourself. Stella says, hello, I'm Stella. Girl Jordan says, hi, I'm Jordan. Dash 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 dash. Doraemon. LVL, in training. Type. Lesser Digimon. Attack. Metal drop. Dash 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 dash. The next one says, hello, I'm Freeman. Dash 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 dash. Freeman. LVL, in training. Type. Lesser Digimon. Attack. Tail slap. Dash 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 dash. The next one says, hello, my name is Gummymon. Dash 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 dash. Gummymon. LVL, in training. Type. Lesser Digimon. Attack. Bubble blow. Dash 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 dash. The next one says, I'm Hopmon, nice to meet you. Dash 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 dash. Hopmon. LVL, in training. Type. Slime Digimon. Attack. Hip hop. Dash 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 dash. The next one says, I am Kapuraimon, nice to meet you. Dash 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 dash. Kapuraimon. LVL, in training. Type. Lesser Digimon. Attack. Howling blow. Dash 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 dash. The next says, I am Sunman, hello. Dash 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 dash. Sunman. LVL, in training. Type. Lesser Digimon. Attack. Bubble blow. Dash 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 dash. Stella and girl Jordan smile and say, nice to meet you. Lincoln smiles and says, well, now we can play. The Digimon call, yes. The rest of the day is played, they even played dodgeball where girl Jordan won. At the end of the day, Digimon and Lincoln are sleeping, Kutamon, Stella and girl Jordan are very exhausted, but happy. Vajramon said he takes care of the little ones and the other four have gone home. When they were back in the world, girl Jordan and Stella say goodbye and go. Chapter 7. Author Pav. It's Sunday and Lincoln and Kutamon are still in bed until someone knocks on the garage door. Lincoln looks up sleepily and looks at the clock. It's 9 in the morning. Lincoln gets up, hides Kutamon under the blanket and opens the door. Stella and girl Jordan stand there. He asks, still sleepy, Stella, Jordan, why are you here? The two do not answer and just look down on Lincoln's legs. The two are also a bit red. Lincoln wonders what's going on, but then realizes that he has slept only in t-shirt and boxer shorts. Lincoln closes the door quickly. His face is red and he puts on his clothes when he finishes. He opens the door again and scratches his back. Embarrassed, he says, sorry, forgot that I only in t-shirt and boxer shorts slept. The girls look at the floor with red faces, squeeze their index fingers and say, it's okay. Lincoln asks, still red and embarrassed, so what brings you to me? Girl Jordan says, we wanted to go back to the digital world today, so if it's okay with you. She is still embarrassed by what has just happened. The same case with Stella, she is also embarrassed. The two come into the garage and Lincoln closes the door. Kudamon comes out from under the blanket and sees the silence between the three and all have red faces, but it shrugs off and just goes to Lincoln. Lincoln says, "We can go back to the digital world, hang on." Stella and Jordan cling to Lincoln and are sucked in by the TV. When the four arrive in the digital world, Lincoln and Kudamon stretch in the warm sun and he asks, "Have you had breakfast?" Stella and Jordan, happy faces disappear quickly and the two frowns. Stella and Jordan say at the same time, "I knew I forgot something." Lincoln chuckles and says, "I'll get something, you can go to the little ones if you want." So go, Lincoln and Kudamon, and leave the two alone. The two look at each other and shrug their shoulders and make their way to the little ones. When Stella and Jordan arrive in the meadow, they see that all of yesterday are there, except for Fremen and Gummymon, and the others look worriedly at the forest. Jordan and Stella go to them and Jordan asks, "What's up?" The Digimon look at the two and Demi-Vimon says, "Oh, hello Stella and Jordan." Stella kneels and asks, "What's going on?" Bukamon points to the forest and says, "We played the ball, but the ball flew into the woods and Fremen and Gummymon said they got it, but before we could say anything, the two were already gone." Doraemon continues, "That was some time ago and we are worried." Stella looks at Jordan with a serious look and Jordan nods. Stella gets up and says, "We'll go and look after the two." Sunman asks, "Are you sure?" Jordan says, "Of course, they're your friends or not, we'll look for them, come on Stella." Kapuraiman says, "Thanks." Stella and Jordan go into the forest and start looking. The two are now a while in the woods and shout, "Fremen! Gummymon!" But nobody answers. The two worry and go faster. They look behind a shrubbery and find Ball, but no sign of Fremen or Gummymon, until the two hear two screams. "Ah!" Jordan has Ball still in hand as the two run towards the scream. They see Fremen and Gummymon the threatened by a dog like Digimon. Dash 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 dash. Doberman. LVL. Champion. Type. Demon Beast. Attack. Black Beam. Dash 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 dash. Meanwhile with Lincoln. Lincoln and Kudamon are just coming to the meadow with a box of breakfast. They see the Digimon staring at the forest. He goes to them and says, "Hello, where are Stella, Jordan, Fremen and Gummymon?" Bukamon points into the forest and says, "Stella and Jordan went after Fremen and Gummymon, who were looking for our ball." Lincoln looks at the forest and says, "How long has it been?" Demiviman says, "I would say 10 minutes, Stella and Jordan are gone." Kudamon says, "That can be dangerous, especially because there's Doberman's precinct there." Lincoln's eyes widen and he says, "I completely forgot that." Everybody hears a scream. "Aw!" Lincoln and Kudamon run to scream, leaving the box at the Digimon. Stella turns to Jordan and says, "Jordan, do you have an idea?" Jordan looks at the ball and says, "I have an idea." Jordan takes the ball and throws the ball on the head of Doberman. Doberman is hit and looks in the direction of Stella and Jordan. He asks, "What was that?" Exclamation mark quote. Without Doberman's notice, Fremen and Gummymon are running behind Stella and Jordan. Stella says, "Why are you threatening them, what did they do?" Exclamation mark quote. Doberman says, "They came to my territory without my permission." Jordan says, "Just because you did that, you do not have the right to do that." Doberman says, "Only one person has the permission to speak to me that way." Doberman runs to the fore and Stella and Jordan turn around and hug the two Digimon. Stella takes Fremen and Jordan takes Gummymon. Stella says, "Do not worry, we'll protect you." Jordan says, "She's right, we're not letting it. Lincoln told us how Digimon are, and I did not believe it at first, but you're way too nice not to be real." Just as Doberman wants to get on the four jumps, a light from Stella and Jordan comes in and two white orbs come out of the two. Stella and Jordan pick up the orbs and two Digivice form. Stella. Jordan. Doberman was thrown to the ground by the light, but gets up again and says, "Two Digivices, no matter the two are still at the in-training level, you have no chance." Doberman sets off to attack, but someone yells, "Holy shot." A golden ray strikes the ground in front of Doberman and he turns to the cause. There stand Lincoln and Kudamon. Doberman says, "Lincoln." Lincoln says, "Doberman, leave my friends alone." Doberman stares at Lincoln and goes back into the woods, and says, "All right." Lincoln goes to Stella and Jordan and asks, "Everything in order?" Stella and Jordan say, "Yes, thank you." Lincoln sees the Digivices in her hands and says, looks like you now have Digimon partner as well. Jordan looks at Gummymon in her arms and says, hello, Gummymon. Gummymon hugs Jordan and says, thanks for protecting us. Stella looks at Freeman in her arms and says, welcome partner. Freeman cuddles his head against Stella and says, thanks, Stella. The rest of the day was fine. Lincoln told Stella and Jordan about the functions of the Digivice and had breakfast together. In the afternoon everyone went back home. Lincoln and Kudamon lay in bed and take a nap. While in the house, Rita goes through the post and finds a letter for Lincoln. She says, Luna, Lenny, could you give this letter to Lincoln? Luna takes the letter and says, why do we have to do that? Rita says, because I'm sure you still love your brother enough that you can bring him a letter. Lenny says, why should not we love Linky? Rita looks at them and says, just go. Luna and Lenny go to the garage and softly open the door and see that Lincoln is lying on the bed. Luna signals Lenny that she should be quiet and Lenny nods. The two go in quietly and put the letter on the desk. Lenny looks at the peacefully sleeping Lincoln and then her eyes fall on Kudamon lying next to Lincoln. Lenny screams, a rat. Lenny takes a stick and wants to hit Kudamon, but the stick is stopped by Lincoln, who holds the stick with his hand. Lincoln looks at them angrily and says, stop that. Chapter 8. Author Pav. It is escalating completely. Lenny and Luna have discovered Kudamon in Lincoln's bed and Lenny wanted to beat Kudamon but was stopped by an angry Lincoln. Lenny, Luna, Lincoln and Kudamon are armed in the garage, Lenny with a stick that was stopped by Lincoln. Lenny says, Linky, let go, there's a rat. Lincoln disarms Lenny and breaks the stick over his knee, saying, this is not a rat. Lenny says, clearly scared, what is it then? Lincoln massages the bridge of his nose and says, what are you doing here anyway? Luna, holding up the letters, says, we're supposed to bring you your mail, dude, and then we found you with this thing in your bed. Lincoln says with annoyance, and you think you can smite on the animal sleeping peacefully next to me. Luna says, no, we just wanted to bring you your mail. What kind of animal is that, dude? Lincoln says, this is not your concern, go out now and thanks for the post. Lincoln picks up the mail and pushes his sisters out of the garage. Lincoln sighs and falls onto the bed. Kudamon walks over and pats her head against his cheek. Lincoln strokes Kudamon and asks, are you okay, Kudamon? Kudamon nods and says, yes, everything is okay, thanks to you. Lincoln closes his eyes and says, you are my partner, we protect each other. Kudamon lies down on Lincoln's chest and curls up. The two fall asleep again and dream beautifully. Meanwhile in the house, Luna and Lenny are back in the house and look at each other worried. Their brother has never been so angry with them. Rita approaches them and asks, what happened? I heard screaming. Luna asks, Mom, did you or Dad buy Lincoln an animal? Rita looks puzzled at her daughters and says, no, how do you think we did that? Lenny says, Linky has a rat with him. Rita says, a rat. Luna shakes her head and says, no, he says it's not a rat, but it's similar to rats. Rita says, we did not buy it. A voice can be heard saying, if you can get this animal from our brother unit, I could analyze it and say what it is. It's Lisa who's just coming out of the kitchen. Rita asks Luna and Lenny, is the animal peaceful? Luna says, seems like it slept peacefully next to Lincoln, and even though Lenny was trying to beat it, it did not attack. Rita sighs and says to Lisa, no experimentation or analysis of this animal. Your brother is angry enough with us. I do not want him to get any more angry just because you cannot keep your curiosity in check. Lisa sighs and says, all right, mother. Luna says, seems like it slept peacefully next to Lincoln, and even though Lenny was trying to beat it, it did not attack. Rita sighs and says to Lisa, no experimentation or analysis of this animal. Your brother is angry enough with us. I do not want him to get any more angry just because you cannot keep your curiosity in check. Lisa sighs and says, all right, mother. Rita and Lisa leave, and Lenny and Luna just look at each other and Luna says, I think we think the same thing. Lenny puts her hand to her chin and asks, are you thinking of a new shoe too? Luna facepalmed and touches Lenny on the collar and says, no, we spy on our bro, I want to know what's wrong with him. Lenny nods and says, okay. Time skip. The next day is actually quite normal, except for the fact that girl Jordan is also sitting with Lincoln and Stella. Lincoln comes home and goes to the garage. He puts away his school supplies and gets ready to go to the digital world, unaware that two sisters of him, watching him. Lenny and Luna stand at the door, which is a crack open. Lenny whispers, "So far, everything seems normal." You see Lincoln holding his digivice in the direction of the TV and Luna asks, "What's he doing there?" Lincoln starts to light up and the two eyes widen. They run into the room and grab him, but they are pulled into the TV. Landed in the digital world, Lincoln is standing, but Lenny and Luna are sitting on the ground and do not realize what's going on. Lincoln stands with his arms crossed, in front of the two, and says, "Could not you mix with my business?" Luna and Lenny are taken out of their trance and Luna asks, "Bro, where are we here?" Lincoln points at them and says, "It's none of your business." Lenny says, "Linky, why are you so nasty to us?" Lincoln says, "Why am I so mean to you? You do not even know why I'm angry." Luna says, "No, we do not know, bro." Lincoln says, "Just think, who destroyed my life, made all my friends ignore me and put me out of my house." Luna and Lenny look ashore and Lenny says, "Linky, we did not know that happened, but it's not our fault that you're bad luck." Kudamon comes out of the digivice and says, "Just listen to yourself, bad luck, bad luck, bad luck, it's all you care about. He's your brother, not some misfortune, you should be ashamed of yourself, you are a terrible family." Lenny, Luna and even Lincoln look shocked at Kudamon. Lincoln because he has never seen Kudamon so angry. Lenny and Luna because they did not expect the beast to speak. Luna asks, "Lenny, the beast has just talked to us and calls us a terrible family." Lenny says, "So I did not hear it, as the only one." Lincoln says, "No, and you are a terrible family, Kudamon is right there." Chapter 9. Author Pav. Luna says, still in shock, that Kudamon can talk. "Bro, what's going on here?" Lincoln crosses his arms and says, "I do not see why I should explain it to you." Luna says, "If you do not tell me, I think I'm going to break down." Lincoln sighs and says, "We are in the digital world, the home of the Digimon." Lenny asks, "Digi what?" Lincoln rolls his eyes in annoyance and says, "Digimon, short for digital monster, which is what Kudamon is." Lincoln points to Kudamon, who looks annoyed at the two. Lenny asks, "Why is this Kudamon with you?" Kudamon says, "Because I'm his partner, and I feel we've treated each other better than you ever did." Lenny feels insulted and says, "We never treated Linky badly." Kudamon frowns and says, "You threw him out of the house, sold his stuff and then he had to beg you to take him to the garage and there are other incidents that I do not want to mention now." Luna holds Lincoln by the collar and says shocked, "You told this thing everything." Lincoln grabs Luna's paw, already with force that she something flinch. He says, "Kudamon, is not a thing, she is my partner, and I warn you, you call her again, a thing and I'll make sure that you regret it. The air is so thick that you could cut it with a knife." Luna is shocked that her brother threatens her and Lenny was frightened if everything they did was wrong. A female voice is heard that says, "Lincoln, who is that?" Lincoln turns and sees Vajramon. He says, "These are two of my sisters." Vajramon's face darkens and she says, "The ones who threw you out of your house because of a dead loser." Lincoln nods and Vajramon says, "You are brave to show you here." Luna asks, "What do you mean?" Vajramon says, "I mean, everyone who knows Lincoln knows the story of how you kicked him out of the house." Lenny says, "Linky, you told everyone." Kudamon nods and says, "Yes, he has, he had no other choice, if he kept it in himself forever, the darkness would have overrun him." Lincoln says, "I'll bring you back and do not tell anyone that this world exists." Before they can do anything, Lincoln grabs them and travels back to the human world. Back in the human world, Lincoln lets them go and says, "Do not tell anyone." With that, he goes back to the digital world. Lenny and Luna are now in the garage and Lenny cries and says, "We drove our brother out of our lives." Back in the digital world, Vajramon, Kudamon and Lincoln are talking about what just happened. At least until a big crash is heard, the three jump up and go out. Further afield in the forest you can see a smoke flag. Lincoln, Kudamon and Vajramon go in the direction of the smoke and what they see shocks them, but especially Vajramon, it's a Digimon that lies in a crater. Lincoln looks at his digivice and sees the info. Dash 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 dash. Black Vajramon. LVL. Mega. Type. Dragon Man. Attack. Terra Destroyer. Dash 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 dash. Lincoln looks at the Digimon that he now knows as Black Vajramon. He says, Black Vajramon mhhh. Kudamon realizes that Frigimon is behaving a bit weird. She asks, Frigimon, are you okay? Frigimon nods and says, yes, but I've heard stories of this Digimon. Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, what stories? Frigimon says, it's supposed to be incredibly strong, and supposedly helped to save the digital world, but it was said it died. How can it be here? The three of them hear a groan, and see the Black Vajramon tremble. Lincoln slithers the crater down to Black Vajramon and puts his hands on him. He says, that does not matter now, I think he's hurt. Frigimon says, you're right, stay with him, I'll pick up my first aid kit. Lincoln and Kudamon are next to Black Vajramon. Lincoln strokes Black Vajramon's head to calm him until he opens his eyes. He sees Lincoln and asks in an exhausted voice, who are you? Lincoln looks at him with a smile and says, I'm Lincoln and that's my partner Kudamon. Lincoln points to Kudamon who bows slightly. Black Vajramon asks, what are you doing? Lincoln replies, you seem hurt, we're waiting for Frigimon to bring the first aid kit. Black Vajramon asks, why are you helping me? Lincoln smiles and says, very simple, you seem nice. Chapter 10. While Lincoln, Kudamon and Frigimon help the injured Black Vajramon, Luna has a family meeting. The Loud family, minus Lincoln, is sitting in the living room waiting for Luna to explain why she called the meeting. Lori is annoyed that somebody orders her to sit there and not to speak with her boo-boo bear that hurt to write. She asks, so Luna, why did you call a meeting? Luna faces her family and says, it's because of Lincoln. You hear the concern in your voice, but the rest of the family just sighs, all but Rita. Lynn asks, annoyed, what about this jinx? Luna says, stop it, Lynn. Lola also says annoyed, why should she stop? Lincoln is a jinx. Luna gets angry but retains her calmness and says, it does not matter now, I and Lenny have been watching Lincoln and it looks like he has some weird device that he can use to travel to a digital world, full of monsters. Luann laughs and says, good joke Luna, why should we believe that? Lenny says, but it's true, I was there. Lisa is just putting her glasses down and saying, it's not possible that a digital world can exist where a human can go in, and then any monsters that come alive cannot exist either. If there were a digital world, those monsters would consist of data and thus not in the possibility to enter this world. Lori says even more annoyed than before, the whole meeting was of no use, thank you for wasting our time Luna. With that, Lori goes upstairs angrily, just like her sisters and Lynn Sr. goes to the kitchen to cook, only Luna, Lenny and Rita are still in the living room. Meanwhile in the digital world, Black Vajramon is now finished treatment and now has some bandaged bodies on his body. Lincoln, Kudamon and Frigimon help settle in and Lincoln asks, everything alright? Black Vajramon moves slightly and says, yes, thank you, but I have to ask again, why did you help me? Lincoln looks at him with a serious look and says, I already told you, because I like you. Black Vajramon squints his eyes and says, you do not even know me. Kudamon jumps on Lincoln's shoulder, points to Black Vajramon, and says, do you really think we have any reason to help you? Lincoln here, has a heart of gold, I believe he would even help his greatest enemy. Black Vajramon just stares at Lincoln until he starts giggling. He says, you're a weird guy, Lincoln. Lincoln scratching his head in embarrassment, he did not expect anyone to say such a thing to him. He says, that's who I am, and I'm proud of it. Black Vajramon nods in pride. Frigimon raises her hand and asks, if I should ask, what happened? Black Vajramon looks up into the sky. He looks like he's thinking, I do not know, I thought I was dead. Kudamon has a shocked face and asks, why do you think so? Black Vajramon says, the last thing I remember being in the human world, I was badly hurt, and with my last breath, sealed the door to the digital world in a certain zone. I do not know how I am here. Lincoln looks at him with a questioning look, but smiles shortly afterwards, saying, it does not matter, then we can become friends. Black Vajramon looks at Lincoln and says, friends. Lincoln nods and says, yes, let's become friends. Black Vajramon looks thoughtful in the air until he says, somebody suggested to me to become my friend. I'm not sure if we've ever become friends, but maybe it would not be really bad. I would be happy to become your friend. Black Vajramon hands Lincoln his hand, or rather his claw, and Lincoln shakes his hand. It's a nice sight until Lincoln's Digivice shines. Lincoln picks up his Digivice and sees it on the display saying, "Ali found, Vajramon." Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, "Do you know what ally found means?" Vajramon says, "I've heard of it before. An ally can help you when you're in trouble, but only if you're really in trouble and there's no way out. If I'm not mistaken, that even works in the human world." Lincoln shrugs and says, "If that's the case, welcome to the team, Vajramon." Vajramon nods and says, "Thanks." A voice sounds, saying, "Please create emblem and name." Lincoln looks at his Digivice again and sees that he can create an emblem and a name for a group. He thinks and asks, "Does one of you have an idea?" Kudamon thinks, but shakes her head. Vajramon raises her hands and says, "I stay out of there, it's your group." Vajramon says, "How about Spartans?" Lincoln thinks for a moment, until he nods and says, "Sure, Spartans sounds good." Kudamon nods and says, "Yes, sounds really good." Lincoln enters the name and then draws. It takes some time but he is satisfied with his work. When Lincoln completed the emblem, light comes from the Digivice and goes to Kudamon, Vajramon and Lincoln. The emblem appears on the shields of Vajramon, on the left arm of Kudamon and on the right arm of Lincoln. Lincoln looks at the emblem and says, "Today is the day the Spartans were called to life." Chapter 11. Author Pav. It's a beautiful day outside. Birds are singing, flowers are blooming and Lincoln is in the garage and getting ready. It's been 2 days he has met Vajramon and they understand each other quite well. Lincoln does not really care about anything right now. He's getting ready and wants to go straight to the digital world, which is stupid, that a rocking sister cannot stand being portrayed by her family as a liar. Luna has decided to assert that she's right, and if Lincoln thinks okay, she does not care, she just does not want to be put off as a liar. Luna is at the door waiting for Lincoln to leave but not knowing that the youngest loud sister is clinging to her back. Lincoln holds up his Digivice and lights up. That's Luna's signal. She's running, holding her brother and being dragged into the digital world and with them, Lily. Arrived in the digital world, Lincoln again faces Luna with a furious facial expression and says, "Why do not you understand that you should not get involved?" Exclamation mark quote. Luna steps back and says, "Lincoln, I know you're mad, but I need proof." Lincoln does not find that funny when he spreads his arms and says, "What do you need evidence for?" Exclamation mark quote. Luna says, "I told the others about this and they do not want to believe me." Kudamon appears from the Digivice. She does not seem to be so pleased, and says, "You did what?" Exclamation mark quote. Luna scratches her head and says, "Well, you have to admit this is pretty crazy and I just could not keep it to myself." Lincoln points his finger at Luna and says, "Listen, Luna, I'm telling you exactly what you've been telling me about your stupid sister fight protocol. Do not interfere with my matters." Luna narrows her eyes and says, "Hey, that does not count, only we're allowed to do that." Kudamon crosses her arms and says, "So you have more to say than Lincoln?" Luna's eyes widen from realization and says, No, I mean yes, I do not know." Lincoln says, "Just let it be good, I'm happy, what's so hard to understand?" Luna throws her hands in the air and says, "It's not hard to understand, but why do you want to keep it a secret? There are some digital monsters that are not real." Lincoln gets angry now. Luna realizes that and is a bit afraid of Lincoln. He says, "They are real. Digimon need to eat, drink, sleep, they need friends, they can be hurt, they are real, they are just like flesh and blood like you and I." Luna asks, "But why keep it secret?" Lincoln facepalmed himself and says, "What would Lisa do if she finds out about this? She was going to do tests with the Digimon, without asking them, I will not let them." Luna protests, "But I'm being portrayed as a liar, I do not want that, do not you understand that, dude?" Lincoln says, "I understand that, but I do not want my friends to be in danger." Luna says, "What kind of friends are those?" She is interrupted by a voice that says, "Poo poo." Luna turns around and sees Lily on her back. Lincoln says, "Lily, you brought Lily?" Exclamation mark quote. Luna shakes her head and says, "No, she must have climbed on my back when I waited for you to go." Lincoln takes Lily in his arms as she sees Kudamon looking at her with a smile. Lily laughs, Lincoln smiles, but Luna says with concern, "Lincoln, do not give Lily something that's happening to her because of your bad luck." Another voice says, "Oh really? It is Vajramon who is just coming by again. she says, it's enough for me. Listen, how long have you been standing here without something happening? Luna is not listening properly and just shoots a photo of her phone, also one of Lincoln and Kutamon. Luna triumphantly holds her phone up and says, yes, a proof, and what did you ask, snowman dude? Vajramon narrows her eyes and says, I asked how long we've been standing here without anything happening, just think about it. Lincoln tries to take the phone away, but Luna stops him. She says, Lincoln, leave it, I have a proof now. Luna grins and somehow wants to go back. She turns and fumbles around the TV, but she hears a pounding as she turns around. She is greeted with the sight of Black Vajramon looking at her. He asks, Lincoln, who is she? Luna's legs tremble and she falls to the ground out of fear of the big armored monster standing in front of her. Lincoln smiles and says, Black Vajramon, good timing, you have to hold on to her. Black Vajramon shrugs his shoulders and holds Luna in the air. Luna tries to free herself by fidgeting, but does not come out of the grip of Black Vajramon. The phone falls out of her hand and Lincoln picks it up. He erases all the photos from the Digimon and put it in his bag. Lily, meanwhile, looks wide-eyed at Black Vajramon and begins to laugh, which actually surprises everyone. Lincoln has reckoned she is scared, but no, she laughs out of all hearts. Lincoln says, this is Black Vajramon, on my shoulder is my partner Kutamon, Lily. Lily laughs and Kutamon says, nice to meet you, Lily. Black Vajramon seems a bit surprised saying, hi. Luna says, Lincoln, could you possibly tell your friend to let me down? Lincoln holds up his Digivice and says, I'll be right back. Lily and Luna are pulled into the TV and land again in the human world. Luna says, Lincoln, give me my phone. Lincoln throws Luna her cell phone and pushes she out of the garage. He gives Lily in her arms and says, let me ask you the question that has asked you, Vajramon. How long have you stood next to me without something has happened? Think about it. He closes the door and locks it. Chapter 12. It's weekend, and Lincoln is already happy because he plans to be in the digital world all weekend. Lincoln needs that. After the situation with Luna, whenever he sees her, he gives her a dirty look. Luna winces at this look but does not care to apologize. But that's no side now, which is important that Lincoln just wants to chill out with his new friends. Lincoln is putting on his jacket and packing his backpack on his back. In the backpack is his pajama, a sleeping bag and a few other things, so he's on his way to the digital world. Arrived in the digital world, Kutamon comes from the Digivice on Lincoln's shoulder. He looks around and sees the Black Vajramon standing a little further at the entrance to the village. Lincoln goes and asks, hey Black Vajramon. Black Vajramon turns slightly to the side and says, oh, hi Lincoln. Kutamon leans forward a bit and asks, why are you standing here at the entrance to the village? Black Vajramon turns around and says, that's because of him. Black Vajramon points to the entrance and there is a raven-like Digimon. Lincoln goes a bit to the front and asks, is everything alright? Can we help you? The same ravening Digimon says, I'm Karadenman and I heard that there should be a man who owns a Digivice. Lincoln says, yes that's me, this is my partner Kutamon. Kutamon nods and says, a pleasure to meet you. Karadenman bows and says, likewise. Lincoln asks, so, can we help you? Karadenman says, yes, I would like to fight you, but only if you agree. Lincoln holds up his Digivice and looks at the info from Karadenman. Karadenman. LVL, Ultimate. Type. Demon Man. Attack. Harmony Swords. Lincoln mumbles, Level Ultimate. Lincoln looks at Kutamon and asks, do you want to fight? Kutamon thinks, nods and says, yeah, if we run away from a fight we're cowards. Lincoln sighs, but gets a serious look and says, you're right and we do not want that, we fight Karadenman. Karadenman smiles and says, on a fair fight. Kutamon jumps off Lincoln's shoulder and stands opposite of Karadenman. Kutamon's pattern on her back lights up and she says, holy shot. She shoots a beam of light at Karadenman, who just leans a bit to the side so that the beam goes off. Lincoln's eyes widen and he asks, how is this possible? Karadenman laughs something and says, this is my attack Harmony Swords, it allows me to see your next steps beforehand. Black Vajramon says, this is a nasty attack. Lincoln nods. Yes, it is. Kutamon tries it again with holy shot but misses again. Kuradenman says, now it's my turn, feather flare. Kuradenman flaps with his wings and black feathers fly towards Kudamon. They meet Kudamon and she is hurled back. Lincoln wants to intervene but is stopped by Black Vajramon. Kudamon gets up shakily, and Kuradenman asks, is that all you got? Kudamon breathes heavily, but has a determined look. Kuradenman says, maybe you should give up. Kudamon shakes her head and says, forget it, if I give up now I cannot show myself to Lincoln anymore. He has suffered so much pain and I do not want to disappoint him. Lincoln wets and says, Kudamon, you will never disappoint me. Kudamon starts to shine and Lincoln screams, Kudamon. Kudamon says, Kudamon Digivol too. Kudamon starts to shine and changes, becoming a bit bigger and looks more like a wolf or a fox. She says, Repamon. Lincoln looks at his Digivice that is displaying the info. Repamon. LVL, Champion. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Razor Wind. Kuradenman looks at Repamon in amazement and says, so that's the power of the Digivice, it's going to be a great fight. Kuradenman gets his sword ready and lunges forward just before he can beat Repamon. She disappears and appears behind him. He turns around and says, that's fast. Repamon says, Razor Wind. Repamon shoots a wind blade from her tail and shoots at Kuradenman, who is hit and falls. Before Kuradenman can get up, Repamon races to him and says, Lion Claw. Repamon cuts Kuradenman with her sharp claws. Kuradenman then blocks with his sword but suffers great damage. He drops his sword and says, I give up, you are very strong Repamon. Lincoln runs to Repamon and hugs her and says, you did a great job Repamon, but do not think you could disappoint me, you could never do it. Repamon cuddles in Lincoln's neck and says, I'm sorry. After a while, the two calm down and Kuradenman says, that was a great fight, and you two have a strong connection. Lincoln nods and says, thanks, what are you going to do now? Kuradenman looks like he's thinking and says, I think we'll just go on traveling. Kudamon says, why do not you join our clan? Kuradenman asks, clan? Black Vajramon replies, we are the Spartans, we are still a very young group and the three of us are the only members. Kuradenman smiles and says, I would like to join, then I have no reason to travel. Lincoln grins and says, welcome to the Spartans, new friend. Lincoln Digivice lights up and the Spartan emblem appears on Kuradenman's hand. Black Vajramon laughs and says, welcome, I think we'll need a house soon. Lincoln ponders and says, does not sound so stupid to have a base. Kuradenman raises his hand and says, I think I can help, I have a big house, but I have not been there for a long time, I guess it needs to be cleaned up. Kudamon says, this will not be a problem, we can do it, thank you Kuradenman. Kuradenman nods and says, come, the house is not that far away. After a while, the four arrive at the house or rather at the mansion. Lincoln's mouth hangs open and he asks, this is your house? Kuradenman says, no Lincoln, this is our house. Chapter 13. It's already the next weekend, the last weekend, where Lincoln got to know Kuradenman. They repaired the house that they now use as a kind of guild house. Lincoln is getting ready, he's done his homework and he wants to spend the whole weekend back in the digital world, but these plans are briefly dashed by his mother coming in the garage with Lily in her hand. She asks, noticeably nervous, Lincoln, could you take care of Lily? Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, why? Rita says, your sisters are gone, your father too and I have to go, an emergency at work, please. She looks pleadingly at Lincoln and he sighs and says, give Lily to me. Rita smiles and gives Lily in Lincoln's hands. Shortly afterwards Rita goes out and sets off for work. Lincoln sighs, not sure what to do next. He says, that means that my trip will fall into the water for now. Kudamon from the Digivice says, I would not say that, there is a way. Lincoln asks, clearly confused, which way there is, and that would be. Kudamon says, take Lily with you. Lincoln thinks and says, why not, she does not seem to be afraid to see you. He looks at Lily and asks, do you want to go to the digital world, Lily? Lily laughs and nods. Lincoln takes this as a yes, writes a note that he is out with Lily and makes his way to the digital world. Lincoln arrives in the digital world, Lily still in his hand, and Kudamon on his shoulder, walking towards Guild. After a short time, he arrives at the gate, which has the emblem of the Spartans. He goes in and enters the house. He says, "I'm back." Karadenman comes around the corner and says, "Ah, hello Lincoln, Kudamon." He bows and Lincoln returns the gesture. Karadenman looks at Lincoln and notices Lily in his arms. He asks, "Lincoln, who is that kid?" Lincoln stops Lily and says, "This is Lily, my baby sister. Lily, that's Karadenman, a friend of mine." Lily looks at Karadenman and starts to laugh and clap. Lincoln chuckles and says, "I think she likes you." Karadenman turns his head to the side and says, "Do you think so?" Lincoln nods and holds Lily over to Karadenman, saying, "Come on, hold her." Karadenman hesitates a bit, but takes Lily in his hand. Lily laughs and touches the mask of Karadenman, then he smiles and laughs lightly. After a while, Lincoln and Karadenman face each other in the guild's dojo. Lincoln, who is wearing training clothes, asks, "What's up?" Karadenman says, "I'll train you Lincoln, you gotta know how to defend yourself." Lincoln asks, although he is sure that he already knows the answer, "No is not an option, is it?" Karadenman says, full of determination in his voice, "No it is not." He points to the wall and says, "Pick a weapon." Lincoln looks towards Black Vajramon, Kudamon and Lily sitting on the lap of Black Vajramon. He mouthed to them, "Help me." Kudamon shakes her head and Black Vajramon says, "Lincoln, I agree with Karadenman, you have to know how to defend yourself." Lincoln sighs in defeat. He knows that he does not come out of it. He goes to the wall of weapons and takes a bow. Karadenman nods and says, "The bow makes a good decision. Attack me, do not hold you back." Lincoln shrugs his shoulders and runs toward Karadenman. Meanwhile, with the Loud Sisters. The Loud Sisters are in the mall right now eating something in the food court. Everyone is having a good time, all but Lenny looking depressed and not sure what to do. She wants to apologize to her brother but he pushes his sisters away from him. The bad thing is Lenny cannot blame him for being mad at her after everything she and her sisters did to him. Lori realizes that something is wrong with Lenny and asks, "Lenny, is everything okay?" Lenny looks up and says, "Yes, everything is fine." Lori says, "Lenny, if something bothers you, tell me, we're sharing a room, I know if something is wrong with you." Lenny sighs and says, "It's because of Lincoln." The other sisters groan after Lenny said that. Lynn says, "What did Stinkholm do?" Lenny narrows her eyes and says, "Stop calling him that." Lana says, "Lenny, you have to calm down, Lincoln's just bad luck, you cannot change that." Lana eats her fries while Lenny just looks at them and says, "Even if that's the case, Lynn does not have the right to offend our brother." Lynn says, "Oh really, Lincoln is the weakest of us anyway, I think I can annoy him as much as I want." Lenny gets angry and says, "Listen, remember that you're nothing without Lincoln, who trains you, though he does not want that." Lynn rolls her eyes and says, "I could practice on my own." Lenny says angrily, "Why did not you do it then?" Lenny gets up and walks away, but Lori asks, "Lenny, where are you going?" Lenny says, "I have no appetite left." With that, Lenny storms away from her sisters and Lynn says, "She'll get over it." Lenny is just going through the mall without really a goal. She passes two girls who could be in Lincoln's class, but Lenny notices the two things they wear on their belts. They are Girl Jordan and Stella. Lenny goes to the two and she asks, "Excuse me." Stella and Girl Jordan look up and Lenny asks, "I do not want to disturb you but I wanted to ask something." Jordan says, "What can we help with?" Lenny asks, "You do not happen to know something about a digital world?" Stella asks while pointing to her digivice, "Do you have one too?" Lenny shakes her head and says, "No, my brother Lincoln has one." Jordan looks darkened and says, "Oh, you're one of his sisters." Even if Lenny was not the smartest one, she noticed the tone of Jordan and the scowl. She says, "I know what we did was stupid, but I want to apologize, but Lincoln does not speak with us, I really want to apologize, can you please bring me to this digital world?" Jordan looks at Stella and says, "We'll help you, we'll come to your house later." Chapter 14. Author Pav. The Loud Sisters are just coming back home. The mood is good, even with Lenny, she is happy that she can talk to her brother. She goes to the garage and tries not to see what works, at least she thinks that a certain black-haired girl is following her. Lenny sits on Lincoln's bed and waits for Girl Jordan and Stella. She hears a knock. She opens the door and the two girls are standing there. Stella asks, "Are you ready?" Lenny nods and lets the two in. The two go in and Lenny closes the door again. Lenny asks, so how does that work? Girl Jordan smiles and says, just hold on. Lenny holds onto Jordan's shoulder and the two of them hold up their Digivice. The three of them are picked up without knowing that the fourth person has come along. Arriving in the digital world, Freeman and Gummymon come out of the Digivices of Stella and Jordan. Lenny looks at the two in astonishment and asks, you also have two of these digi things? Stella narrows her eyes and says, these are not things, they are living creatures. A cold, monotonous voice says, so you did not lie. The three and the Digimon jump out of fear and look behind. There stands Lucy Loud. Lenny comes over at first and asks, Lucy, what are you doing here? Lucy says, I heard you want to apologize to Lincoln, and I want it too. It was stupid of me to think something like that. He's bad luck, he's my brother who always helps me. Even if Lucy does not like it, Lenny hugs her little sister. Stella, Jordan, Freeman and Gummymon stand at the side and smile at this sight. A while later, the two stop and Lenny asks, so where is Linky? Girl Jordan says, good question, he's usually in the area. A male voice says, not right now. Everyone looks in the direction of the voice and Vajramon approaches. Lenny and Lucy froze briefly, because of the sight of the big fire creature, but do not let it show. Freeman says, hello Vajramon. Vajramon says, hello you four, or should I say six, who are they? He points to Lenny and Lucy. Jordan says, these are two of Lincoln's sisters, they want to apologize. Vajramon examines them and says, if that's so, I know where Lincoln is. Lenny asks, where? Vajramon says, in the house of his little group, it's in that direction, just go this way along. He shows a path that leads into the forest. The six set off, four of them just to say hello to their friend and two to apologize. Meanwhile with the Spartans, Lincoln slides exhausted into the hot water. He has been fighting against Vajramon until just now, but now he is sitting, Vajramon, Kudamon, Vajramon and Lily sitting on his lap in the hot spring of the house. Vajramon washes his forehead with a rag and says, ah, there's nothing better than bathing in a hot spring after training. Vajramon nods and says, indeed my friend, indeed. Lincoln says very tired, training was a fight that only you could win. Kudamon laughs and says, that's right, but you've done well. Lily agrees with Kudamon. She says, poo-poo. Lincoln smiles and says, thanks. Vajramon lets out a loud laugh and says, Lincoln, you fought well, and I wanted to know where we have to work. Lincoln nods and asks, what do we have to work on? Vajramon says, much, get ready for it, hell, no, just kidding. Everyone starts to laugh, but Vajramon says, but it's going to be hard. Lincoln sighs and says, I thought so. With the girls are just arriving at the house of the Spartans and their jaws hit the floor. Jordan asks, this is Lincoln's house. Stella says, house is an understatement, I would call it a mansion. Gummymon asks, do you think we can just go in? Freeman says, well, the gate is open and we are friends, so come. Freeman and Gummymon go forward and Stella and Jordan follow quickly. They say, hey Gummymon, Freeman. Lenny and Lucy shake off their shock and follow the four. They go into the house and hear laughter. They follow the laughter and arrive at a door. They go in and see a room with a few cupboards with baskets in them. Stella is so familiar while Jordan goes to the next door. Stella's eyes widen and say, wait. But it was too late. Jordan opens the door and they see Lincoln and the others in the hot spring. Lincoln looks shocked in the direction and Jordan and Stella hide their eyes with their hands but leave a small slit between their fingers. Lenny and Lucy look away and Lincoln screams, out. Girl Jordan closes the door and the four go out. A little later, everyone is sitting in the living room and there is silence until Lincoln breaks them. So what are you doing here? Stella says, still a little red, we wanted to say hello, and your sisters wanted to apologize. Kudamon says, aha, did you understand that you were wrong? Lucy and Lenny look on the floor with shame and Lucy says, yes, but I wanted to ask something, what about this house and why is Lily with you? Lincoln says, Mom had to go and no one was there, so I took her with me and the house is our guild. You can make a kind of guild, we're the Spartans. Jordan asks, who came up with the name? Vajramon raises his hand and says, me. Lenny says, Linky, I'm sorry for everything, can you find in your heart to forgive us? Lucy says, I'm sorry too, I'm so sorry, you've always helped me so much and I'm doing something like this, please forgive me. Lincoln seems to think, sighs, smiles and says, I forgive you. Lucy and Lenny start to cry and run to their brother to hug him. Lincoln returns the hug and smiles. Chapter 15. Author Pav. Lincoln, Kudamon, Blackwargreymon and the girls are still sitting in the living room until the sliding door opens and Karadenman puts it on the table with a tray saying, it's nothing special, just something small to eat. On the tray are some onigiri. Lincoln takes one and starts eating. The girls follow his example and also take some onigiri. They are delicious. The Digimon also take some onigiri, only Lily not. Lincoln notices and gets Lily's food out of his backpack. He already thought she was going hungry. Lincoln takes Lily on the lap and begins to feed her. While the girls watch this cute scene, girl Jordan asks, so, who are you both? She points to Blackwargreymon and Karadenman. The two look at each other and Karadenman says, you first. Blackwargreymon nods and says, I am Blackwargreymon, I am the first ally of Lincoln, and also the one who came up with the name of our group. Stella asks, how did you meet? Blackwargreymon replies, I landed near the village and was injured. Lincoln and Kudamon were the first creatures to come to me without fear, and they are my first real friends. Stella looks at Karadenman and asks, and you are and how did you meet? Karadenman says, I'm Karadenman, I used to travel a lot because I had no sense in my life. I actually originally owned the house, but one day I heard of a guy with a Digivice, so I came here, to fight against his Digimon partner. It looked like I was going to win, but then came the power of Digivice and the power of friendship between Kudamon and Lincoln, and together they have managed to reach the next level. Lenny asks confused, next level? Lincoln notes that and explains, Digimon have level. There's in training, rookie, champion, ultimate and mega. For example, Kudamon is in rookie level, Karadenman is ultimate and Blackwargreymon is mega. When they reach the next level it's called Digivolution. Lenny nod and continue eating. Lincoln looks into the inner garden and sees that the sun is slowly setting. He looks at Lily and says, we should bring you home, Mom is probably already scared. Lucy says, would be wise, can you take us home? Lincoln nods and says, sure. He turns to Stella and Jordan and asks, would you like to come with us? The two nod, stand up and Jordan says, yes we like to come along. Lincoln turns to his Digimon friends and says, I'll be back soon. The six and Freeman and Gummymon go out of the house and make their way to the village. The remaining sunlight falls through the trees and light up the path. A pleasant light warm breeze flies through the nature. Lenny smiles and says, it's really nice here. Lincoln puts his hands behind his head and says, yes, that's why I like it so much, a quiet world full of adventures and friends. Stella thinks and asks, Lincoln, did you know the Doberman, which almost attacked us then? Lincoln is silent for a moment and says, yes. Jordan asks, how did you meet? Lincoln sighs and says, this is a story for another time. The six arrive at the village and go through the television back into the human world. Lincoln gives Lily to Lenny and says, go in with her. Lenny nods and says, good night, Linky. Luxie says, night, Lincoln. The two go into the house and Lincoln turns to Stella and Jordan. He says, good night you both. The two smile and hug Lincoln briefly and then leave the garage. Lincoln, who is now a little red, returns to the digital world. In the loud house, Lenny and Lucy come straight into the house and see a troubled Rita. She sees the two and Lily in Lenny's arms. She goes to the two and takes Lily from Lenny's paw and says, Lily, there you are, where did you find her? Lucy says, Lincoln gave Lily to Lenny a few minutes ago. Rita sighs and says, I have to talk to him, he cannot just be gone so long, something could have happened. Lenny says, Mom, Linky took good care of Lily, he fed her and bathed her too, he did not do anything wrong. Rita asks, Lucy, is that true? Lucy nods and says, yes, Lincoln did not do anything wrong. Rita sighs and says, she looks okay, I was just scared. Lenny and Lucy are about to leave the house when Rita asks, how is he? Lenny says, if you mean Linky, he's fine. Rita asks, what is he doing right now? Lucy thinks, she needs a lie. She says, I think he sleeps, you should leave him alone. Rita looks sadly on the floor and says, oh, okay. The two go out of the room and Rita says to herself, can we ever fix this? Chapter 16. Lincoln Pav. It's been a month since I got along with Lucy and Lenny again. We get along well again. sometimes I bring them something from Digivolution, because they've asked me where this good smell comes from. Today is another game of Lynn. Of course, they do not take me to the game, but I don't care, I have to wait for a package anyway. Me and Kutamon are chilling on my bed in the garage, she's lying on my stomach and I'm stroking her head. It's peaceful until we hear a noise, we look at the TV and see someone coming out of it. Kutamon jumps to the ground in an attack position and I jump off the bed and put my hand behind my back. The light goes out and in front of us is a small, pink, rabbit-like Digimon, with a scarf and headphones. I get out my Digivice and look at the info. Kutamon. LVL, Rookie. Type. Fairy. Attack. Ultrasonic Song. It looks confused and asks with a girl voice, where am I here? She sees us and starts screaming and laying on the floor and says, please do not hurt me. What is she talking about? She's probably scared. Kutamon is leaving her fighting position and I say, hey, calm down, we're not doing anything to you. She looks up and asks, really? I nod and say, no, do not be afraid. She seems to calm down and gets up. She says, sorry, I'm Kutamon and I have no idea where I am. I chuckle and say, you are in the human world, if I may ask you have a home. Kutamon shakes her head and says, no, at least not anymore, I went off alone to meet new friends, may I ask you for your name? Kutamon raises her paw and says, I'm Kutamon, nice to meet you. I say, I'm Lincoln, nice to meet you Kutamon. Kutamon smiles and asks, the question may come a bit suddenly, but can we be friends? Yes, she is right, the question comes suddenly, but I see no reason why not. Kutamon seems to have read my mind and says, we would like to be your friends. Kutamon seems to be happy and a light comes from my Digivice moves to Kutamon and leaves the emblem of the Spartans on the headphones. She asks, what was that? I scratch myself on the back of my head and say, unsure if she'll freak out. It looks like you've become part of my group, we're called the Spartans, you do not mind, right? Kutamon shakes her head and says, no, as long as I can make friends I'm happy. The three of us talk for a while, until I hear a knock. I open the door and it's the supplier of the pack. I sign and he gives me the package. I bring the package to the garage and Kutamon asks, what's that? Kutamon answers, something we ordered for the guild. The package is relatively large. I'm glad that Kuradenman has trained me the entire month. I want to open the package and make sure that everything is there, but a noise from my Digivice distracts me. I look at the Digivice and see that a map is displayed and a point can be seen. Kutamon says, like back then, with Elekmon. I say, Kutamon come, Kutamon, you come too. Kutamon goes into the Digivice and Kutamon hides in my backpack. I open the door and start running in the direction of the point. Of course, this point must be at the sports field where Lynn has her game today. But I do not see any Digimon, I'm just hiding behind the bleachers and waiting for something to happen. I watch the game as well. Lynn's team is losing, let me guess I'll be held responsible later. I wait until I hear someone say, what is this fog? I look at the field and see a big cloud of fog, the players running out of the fog into their coaches. Kutamon says, Lincoln, I think Digimon is in the fog. I say, okay, I'm going in. Luckily I bought a pair of sunglasses. I put on my sunglasses and run into the fog. Luckily nobody saw me. I let Kutamon out and Kutamon comes out of my backpack. I listen and hear a scream. I turn to the scream and see a big blue Digimon, and a girl, I think her name is Margot, she lies on the floor and the Digimon is coming towards her. I get my Digivice out and a rod from my back. The Digivice shows. Vajramon. LVL. Champion. Type. Animal. Attack. Drill spin. I press a button on the rod and it turns into my bow. I rush forward and block an attack of Vajramon with my bow. I just hope that Margot does not recognize me through the fog and say in a deep voice, get out of here, now. Margot gets up and walks out quickly. I hear Kutamon say, holy shoot. A golden ray hits Vajramon and it jerks. I use it well and hit it with my bow in the side. The Vajramon is now trying to attack Kutamon, but Kutamon is screaming, ultrasonic song. She's starting to sing awful singing. The Vajramon is being hit. I go behind the Vajramon and get my phone out and open a gate to digital world. I shout, Kutamon now. The two again use their attacks and the Vajramon is sucked into the phone. The fog dissolves and I turn my bow again. Kudamon says, Lincoln, we should get out of here quickest. I nod and say, a very good idea. I take Kutemon and Kudamon and run out of the fog, but in the direction where no one is. Chapter 17. Lincoln Pav. I arrive home just in time before I hear Vanzilla arrive. I'm in the garage and say, Kutemon, Kudamon is hiding, I have a bad feeling. The two nod and hide under my bed. It does not take long for an angry Lynn to enter the garage door. I knew it. She yells, Lincoln, you ruined my game. I crossed my arms and said, I do not know what you're talking about, I've been here all the time. I know that I'm lying right now, but I'm not the one who ruined the game, but the Vajramon. Lynn gets even angrier and takes out a baseball bat and points to me and says, do not lie, you jinx, you're to blame, nobody else. The former Lincoln would be scared now, but I'm not scared. I say in a cool, annoyed voice, I'm not to blame, I do not know what happened, but I'm not to blame, so go out. I point to the door where the rest of the family is standing and watching us. A few gasps because I command Lynn something. Lynn's head goes red and steam comes out of her ears. She says, you are not commanding me. She swings the bat toward me, but I dodge, with a little movement. This continues until I'm tired and catch the bat in the air. The eyes of Lynn and my family are widening and I take the bat away from Lynn and say, you attack me, you realize this is a crime, right? She grits her teeth and says, it does not matter, you bad luck charm deserves it. Lincoln looks at his family and says, and you did not do anything, what was that, did you want her to break my head? Dad says, Lincoln, do not talk to us like that. I roll my eyes and say, of course you're on her side. Lori asks, what's that supposed to mean? I close my eyes and say, Dad and Mom are always on your side. I can be happy if somebody is on my side once, but that happens so seldom. Lynn just wanted to break my head and you just stood there. I take some of you because you are scared, but parents should not be afraid of their children, nor hide when two sisters are arguing about a dress. Quote. Mom looks at Lori and Lenny and asks, wait, that's why you argued about a dress? Lori scratches his head, embarrassed and says, maybe. Dad says, honey, we're getting off topic here. Lenny says, Dad, Mom, Lincoln is right, Lynn was just trying to hurt him, and you're more concerned about talking to you. Lynn gets up and says, why are you on his side? You're my sister, you should be on my side. Lucy says, no, Lynn, that was really going too far, with a baseball bat trying to hit him. Lynn points at me and says, he was at my game, he has to pay. I say, Lynn, did you see me at your game? Lynn looks at me angrily and says, no, but I know you were there. I say, you have no evidence, so your charge is pretty weak. Dad sighs and says, Junior, just come, your brother is right. Lynn growls and walks to the door, but says, you're going to pay. I look at her and say coolly, I do not think so. Lynn and the rest leave the garage and leave me alone. I sigh and sit on the bed. Kudamon and Kutemon come out from under the bed and sit next to Lincoln. Kutemon asks, what is this family? Kudamon answers, a bad one. I say, yes, you're right. I get up and say, let's bring the package to the guild. I pick up the package and travel to the digital world with Kudamon and Kutemon. Once there, we get 3 of the package to the guild. We are greeted by Black Vajramon and Karadenman and the two help bring the package in the living room. I open the pack and Karadenman pulls out the contents. It's a pretty big one, TV and some futons. Karadenman says, off futons, thanks Lincoln. He had asked me to order a few, because we have no beds here. I say, no problem. Kudamon smiles and says, you can start to feel really at home here. I say, yes, that's right. Chapter 18. Author Pav. A week after the events at Lynn's game, is a repeat of the game, as it could not be played out by the onset of fog. The loud house is in hurry, in a few minutes they have to go, Lynn to play and the rest of the family to cheer her on. All but one, who of course is Lincoln, but he does not care about it, he sees at least 70% of the family, anyway no longer is a family. Something seems to be wrong in the house, Lynn seems to be angry, why? It's because of Rita, she's not feeling well and wants to stay home, very much against Lynn's mood, she wants her mother to come along. She says, Mom, are you sure, you'll miss me then I get the victory? Rita sighs and massages her head, she says, Junior. I'm sure I'm not feeling well. Lynn protests, but she is interrupted by her father. Junior, if your mother is not feeling well, let her alone, and if she wants to stay at home, let her do that. Lynn looks at the floor, disappoints and says, okay Dad. Lynn Sr. nods and says, well, go to Vanzilla now, we're leaving soon. Lynn leaves the house and Lynn Sr. tells his wife, we'll come home as soon as the game is over, you should rest. Rita smiles and says, thanks, Lynn, you can go eat ice cream after the game, if you want. Her husband nods and goes out of the house. Shortly afterwards you can hear how Vanzilla moves away from the house. Meanwhile, in the garage, Lincoln is about to go outside, but is stopped by Kudamon, who says, Lincoln, would you mind if I stay at home? Lincoln looks at his Digivice and says, no problem, but why? Kudamon says, I'm very tired, I slept little yesterday. Lincoln nods and says, no problem Kudamon. He lets Kudamon out again and she jumps on the bed and lies down. He says, I'll be back soon. With that, Lincoln leaves the garage and leaves Kudamon alone. Some time later, Rita goes into the kitchen to get some drinks for herself, but looks through the window of the garage. She says, I should talk to Lincoln. She goes to the garage and knocks on the door. When she gets no answer, she opens the door and says, Lincoln, are you there? I'd like to talk to you. She looks around in the garage and sees that it is actually well cleaned. Unlike she has imagined, she looks around but sees no Lincoln but only Kudamon lying on the bed and now looking at Rita. Rita looks at the white golden creatures and asks, are you the beast my daughters talked about? Kudamon stares at Rita, but then nods. Rita says, thank you for giving my son company. Kudamon just keeps staring at Rita as she continues, I know I have no right to ask that, but could you continue to give him company? Kudamon nods and Rita says, thank you very much, I really appreciate that, you're a good friend. Rita just wants to leave when Kudamon says, even if I accept the gesture, it does not mean that I like you. Rita turns around in shock and looks at Kudamon, who looks at Rita with a serious look. Rita holds her head and says, I'm feeling worse, I just thought this animal has spoken. Kudamon looks at her and says, because you're right, I talked, you're not crazy. Rita takes a step back and asks, what are you? Kudamon gets up and says, I'm Kudamon, a Digimon, that's short for digital monster. Rita asks, does my son know that you? Kudamon says, that I can talk. Of course he knows that, he is my partner. Rita asks confused, partner. Kudamon explains, Digimon can have human partners, Lincoln is mine. Rita asks, what are the Digimon partners doing? Kudamon says, Digimon are your best friends in all times, we have fun together, help each other and much more. Kudamon says, but I want to talk about something else, about this family. Rita looks at the floor and says, I suppose Lincoln told you what happened. Kudamon nods and says, yes, and I'm shocked that a family would do that. Rita looks down on the floor in shame and Kudamon says, I'm making a point here, I do not like you. Chapter 19. Author Pav. Rita scratches her head and asks, I know the question may be stupid, but why do you hate me? Kudamon looks at her with a, are you serious? Look and Rita just looks at her with a, I do not know why, look. Kudamon sighs and says, why could I hate you? Rita keeps thinking until she thinks. She asks, is it because of Lincoln? Kudamon nods and says, who else? Rita flinches through the sound in Kudamon's voice and says, what did he tell you? She is noticeably nervous. Kudamon says, everything. At the tone in her voice you realize that Rita better not trying to talk herself out. Kudamon narrows her eyes and says, how dare you throw this boy out of the house for something ridiculous like bad luck? There is no luck, there is only skill. If you are too stubborn to understand that, you have not the right to have children. Rita looks at the floor full of shame and Kudamon continues, Lincoln is a nice and mature young boy for his age. He saved me back then, he helped a big and menacing looking Digimon without thinking twice about it. Rita sinks further in and Kudamon goes on to say, Lincoln is more grown up than his sister. In some cases, this Lori is on the phone all the time, even if she is to take care of the others. Without Lincoln you might have died last week. Rita asks, what do you mean? Kudamon explains, last week at the game, a Digimon appeared, Lincoln and I stopped it, without us you would probably be dead or seriously injured. Rita puts her hand over her mouth and says, that's what Lincoln did for us. Kudamon nods and says, you know what, there's a digital world where I and all the other Digimon come from, and I hope if it ever comes to a choice what world he chooses, I hope he takes the digital world. The door opens and Lincoln comes in with a bag of ingredients and says, hey Kudamon, I have. He stops when he sees his mother and Kudamon in front of him and says, dang it. Meanwhile at the game of Lynn. To say the game is going bad would be an understatement, it's going to be terrible. 1 to 13 is for the opposing team, and Lynn does not like it. She mumbles all the time in the field until the coach calls her and her team. The team goes to the coach and she says, okay team, we have half an hour to play, it is still possible to win, Lynn, we change you out. Lynn is shocked and asks, why? The coach says, because you've shot every ball off so far. Meanwhile, in the stands at the Louds, Lola asks, Daddy, why does Lynn play so bad today? Lynn Sr. looks at his daughter and says, I do not know, honey. Lola says, maybe it's influenced by Lincoln's bad luck. Luann says, that would be possible. Lynn Sr. asks, how is this possible? Lori says as she looks up from her cell phone, maybe the garage got infected with his bad luck and now transfers it to our house. Lana says, Dad, I think we have to find some solution. Lynn Sr. wanted to say something but is interrupted by a loud scream. It's not my fault that I play so bad, it is because of that bad luck charm. It's Lynn and she's not happy at all. She crunches her teeth and Margot asks, what do you mean by bad luck charm? Lynn says, this sad, weak, excuse of a brother. The coach says, Lynn Loud Jr. If you do not stop immediately, I have to refer you to the place. Lynn protests, no, I know that bad luck charm is here somewhere, just to ruin my game because he has no talent himself. Lynn Sr. says, oh. He gets up and goes to Lynn and says, Junior, listen, you need to calm down now, or you'll never play again, we'll take care of it later. Lynn is beaten and says annoyed, fine. Lynn is now sitting on the bench, waiting for the game to pass, saying silent, when I get him in my fingers. Chapter 20. Author Pav. In the garage of the Louds, Rita, Lincoln and Kudamon are silent. Rita is the first to break the silence. She says, well, I understand that correctly. There are creatures with the name Digimon. You, Lincoln, have a Digimon partner and spend yours time in the digital world with a self-created group called Spartans. Lincoln nods and says, yeah, that's pretty much it. Rita takes a deep breath and says, Lincoln, why are you doing such a thing? That's definitely dangerous. I mean, you speak and train with digital monsters. Lincoln crosses his arms, tilts his head, and says, this is no more dangerous than football. Rita says, oh really, Lincoln, you're trained with weapons, by a monster. Lincoln says, Kuradenman is not a monster, he's my friend and sensei and training is a martial art. Lynn is also taught martial arts, with her, you do not mind. Rita says, Lynn needs the lesson, what if something happens? Lincoln frowns and says, it sounds like only girls are being threatened by weird people. Sorry Mom, but that's not so. Rita says nervously, no, I did not mean that, I mean, before Rita can go on talking, Lincoln says, Mom, that's exactly what you wanted to say. I know that I once said that I have thick skin, but after years being beaten, blackmailed, and accused by my sisters and my parents who never listened to me are enough. Rita says, Lincoln, we are listening to you. He shakes his head and says, no, you do not, the toilet thing, the thing with the shop, and there's a lot more. I'm just saying, I was not the one who clogged the toilet, it was one of mine sisters and I were not to blame that we were banished from the shop. Rita thinks, sighs and says, Lincoln, I know that a simple apology will not be enough. It's true that we're more attentive to the girls than we are and we focus more on them than you. But are we honest, you are not like your sisters, you are not as active as you, so we thought we should focus more on your sisters. Kudamon looks at Rita and says, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You knew exactly what you're doing when you've had so many children. You cannot just say that you focus on the rest of the children while you ignore one of your children. Rita leaves her head, in shame, and says, I know and I'm really sorry, we should have paid more attention to you. Lincoln says, do you know what it feels like to be unable to talk to someone if you have a problem and then you have sisters who make fun of giving you wrong tips? Rita shakes her head and says, no, I do not know what it feels like and I cannot say enough about it and I cannot change the past, but I apologize and I hope you can forgive me. Lincoln stares at Rita, sighs and says, you're coming, I want to introduce you to the Spartans. Rita looks at her son with hope in her eyes and says, your group. Lincoln replies, yes. Kudamon jumps on Lincoln's shoulder and he takes his mom's hand and shows his Digivice on the TV and the three are sucked in. The three come from the TV in the living room of the Spartans. Nobody is in the room and the sliding door to the courtyard is open. Rita looks around in surprise. Little footsteps are listening in at the door. Cutemin passes by until she stops and looks at the room. She smiles and says, "Hi guys, how are you?" Lincoln replies, "I'm fine, Cutemin." Kudamon answers, "Me too." Cutemin sees Rita and says, "What is she doing here?" Kudamon replies, "She wants to apologize and Lincoln wants to introduce her to the Spartans." Lincoln says, "Mom, this is Cutemin, the youngest member of the Spartans." "Cutemin, this is my mom," Read aloud. Cutemin looks at her and says, "Hello, I'm Cutemin and I do not like fighting." Rita says, "Hello Cutemin." Lincoln asks, "Where are Karadenman and Vajramon?" Cutemin says, "The two trained together." Kudamon says, "Oh boy, that escalates anyway." Lincoln says, "True." The four go toward the training hall, and when they open the door Vajramon yells, "Terra Destroyer!" and shoot a red-black ball towards Karadenman. He tries to dodge, but is hit by the power of the bullet. He says, "I give up." He gets up and says to Vajramon, "Your power is truly indescribable." Vajramon nods and the two notice the people at the entrance. Lincoln, Cutemin and Kudamon look normal. They've seen it before, but Rita is scared and they realize that. Vajramon points his claw at Rita and asks, "Lincoln, who is that?" Lincoln says, "This is my mom." Vajramon and Karadenman do not seem to like it and Karadenman says, "Aha, the mother of these devils who are his sisters." Vajramon says, "To make it clear, we do not like you." Chapter 21. Lincoln Pav. After some time talking, my mom gave up and leaves me alone with the Digimon and she does not tell anyone about it, but Vajramon and Karadenman still do not like her. Me, my mom, Kudamon and Cutemin are just going back to the human world because the others will be back soon. Great. We're just coming out of the TV when we hear Vanzilla approach. The doors are opening and they are slammed shut. I say to Kudamon and Cutemin, "Hide you somehow." Kudamon hides behind my pillow on a bed and Cutemin sits down next to my pillows. Now she looks like a stuffed animal. Mom asks, "Why should they hide?" I cross my arms and say, "Because, 1, 2 AAANNNND3. The door of the garage is kicked open and Lynn says, "Okay Stinkholm, you'll pay for it now." Just as Lynn gets into the garage, Mom says, "He'll pay for what, young lady?" Lynn is shocked, probably because Mom is here with me and I can guess what she's saying next. She says, "Mom, what are you doing here? You're being tainted by bad luck." I knew it. Mom narrows her eyes and says, "It's enough for me with this bad luck." Lynn smiles. She has probably misunderstood what she means. She says, "That's good, then we can kick the bad luck charm out." I facepalm myself. How can anyone be so stupid? Mom says, "This is not what I meant. I mean I do not want to hear any more about these bad luck nonsense. If anyone loses a word about bad luck, they'll be punished." Lynn's jaw almost touches the floor. She says, "But Mom, he's ruined another game of mine." Mom looks at her and says, "How should he have done that? He was with me all day and we were just here." Lynn's eye starts to twitch and she says, "But Dad says, Junior, just go into the house. If your mother says she and Lincoln were here all day, that will be true." Lynn goes in and Mom says, "I'll go back in, have a nice day." Mom goes and the rest of my sisters too, except for Lola and Lana. I look at the two confused and ask, "What do you want?" Lana says, "Why do you have to make it hard for us?" I ask, "What?" Lola says, "You make it hard for us, with your bad luck." She points to me. I scoff. The two are not serious, are they? I say, "I'm making it hard for you. How many fairy tales do you want to tell yourself?" Lana asks, "What?" I answer, "You make my life difficult, not the other way around. Because of you I have lost my friends, my house and the little bit of love I had of you. I live in a garage." I show the garage and they look around until I notice Lola's eyes stick to something. I follow her gaze and see Cutemin. She will not. Lola asks, "What's that sweet thing on your bed? That does not suit you." "I'll gladly take it on myself." She tries to get past me, but I hold her. I say, "No, you do not get her." Lola looks at me angrily and asks, "Why not?" I answer, with no fear, because she belongs to me and you do not deserve her. Lola asks, why? I say, just because you addressed me today so that I make life difficult for you, go out. The two do not move, then I have to be louder, get out. The two jump and run out of the garage. I close the door, let myself fall on the bed and say, what a stressful day. Time skip a few days later. Me and Kudamon are just returning from work in the restaurant as we come across something off the path. Kudamon says, Lincoln, what's that? It points in one direction and I see an object overgrown with tendrils. I say, I do not know, let's take a look. We go and remove the tendrils. It is a motorbike that is a bit broken. Kudamon says, what do you mean, can you fix it? I take a closer look and say, the engine does not seem to be broken, with enough time we can do it. I raise the bike so that I can push it and run my hand over the saddle and say, do not worry, we'll fix you up again. Chapter 22. Author Pav. It is a sunny and beautiful day in the digital world. Lincoln is out and fixing the motorbike. Kudamon watches him and occasionally gives him a tool. It is completely peaceful until Earth quakes briefly. Kudamon looks around and asks, what was that? Lincoln looks at the house and yells, hey Vajramon, did you throw a Terra Destroyer? Vajramon's voice comes from the house. He says, no, I have no idea why the Earth has shaken. Lincoln smiles and calls back, okay, thanks for the info. Vajramon answers, no problem. Lincoln looks at Kudamon and says, but what was that? Lincoln looks around and sees smoke rising, saying, Kudamon, there's something in the back. Kudamon looks in the direction and says, right, let's examine it. Lincoln nods. Kudamon jumps on his shoulder and the two make their way to the smoke. When the two arrive at the smoke, there is a crater, and someone groans. Kudamon and Lincoln look at each other and nod as they go into the crater. When Lincoln sees something, he says, is this a Digimon? He shows his Digivice on the creature and info is displayed. Dash 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 dash. Lady Digimon. LVL, Ultimate. Type. Fallen Angel. Attack. Darkness Wave. Dash 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 dash. Kudamon looks at Lady Digimon and says, Lincoln, she is hurt and unconscious, what are we doing? Lincoln picks her up bridal style and says, we have to get her to the guild, there we can fix her. Luckily Vajramon showed me how to do that. With that, Lincoln runs back to the guild holding Lady Digimon close. Lady Digimon lies in a futon in one of the guild's rooms. Some parts of her body are bandaged, and a wet rag is lying on her face. She groans and slowly opens her eyes. She looks around and asks, where am I? The moment the door is pushed to the side and Lincoln is there with a tablet, he sees how Lady Digimon looks at him and says, ah, you are awake. She tries to get up, but cringes because of the pain. She lies down again and asks, who are you? Lincoln closes the door with his foot and says, I'm Lincoln, me and my partner Kudamon have found you injured. Lady Digimon smiles and says, I'm Lady Digimon, thank you for helping me, you're human right? Lincoln goes closer to her and says, yes, and no problem, I like to help, especially someone so beautiful. Lady Digimon blushes and tries to change the subject. She asks, oh, what do you have with you? Lincoln sits next to her and puts the tablet down next to them, saying, I brought you something to eat. Rice porridge, good for the body. Lincoln takes a spoonful of rice porridge and holds it before Lady Digimon. He says, say ah. She blushes and opens her mouth. Lincoln feeds her and she says, that tastes good. After a few minutes, the plate is empty and Lady Digimon looks happy. Lincoln smiles, but then looks serious. He asks, how were you so messed up? Lady Digimon says, I just went flying and was shot out of the sky. I do not even know what hit me, I was completely surprised. Lincoln pats her head and says, it's all right, you can stay here if you want. She smiles and says, I would like that. A light appears and the emblem of the Spartans appears on her claw. Chapter 23. Author Pav. Several days have passed since Lady Digimon came to the Spartans. Lincoln is still working on the bike when the door opens and Kudamon and Lady Digimon come through the door. Kudamon asks, how long do you think you'll need until you finish? Lincoln is cleaning his hands with a cloth when he says, I can answer the question, I do not need time anymore because I've finished fixing it. He pulls a cloth away and says, Tada. The cloth flies away and there is the repaired motorbike. Lady Digivolution says, the bike looks familiar. Kudamon asks, Lincoln, I have to ask, but can you ride a motorcycle? Lincoln scratches his head, embarrassed, and says, no, but I'll learn it one day. Kudamon giggles and says, I believe you. Lady Digivolution also chuckles and says, it will not be necessary, I remember this bike will teach everyone to drive within seconds, you just have to sit on it. Lincoln asks, how do you know that? She replies, I've heard stories about it. Lincoln nods and sits on the bike. First he does not feel anything, but then a pain flows through him, he closes his eyes, and shivers a bit, until the pain stops, he opens his eyes and feels better. Kudamon asks, are you okay? Lincoln nods and says, yes, it only hurt for a moment, but I can drive now. Lady Digivolution asks, really? He nods, taps his head and says, everything in here. Lady Digivolution asks a bit shy, so maybe we want a ride and could I come with you? Lincoln smiles and says, get on both of you. Kudamon jumps forward Lincoln and Lady Digivolution sits behind him and puts her arms around Lincoln, who smiles and starts driving. The three go for a while, and just enjoy the beautiful view. Now Lady Digivolution also enjoys that she can be so close to her savior, she has also cuddled more to him. Of course, Lincoln has noticed that, but it does not bother him, much more he enjoys the time he can spend with Lady Digivolution. Of course, Kudamon noticed that as well and just grins, she knows where this will lead. The three drives by a lake, as a dragon-like Digimon with a red cape, stands in the way. Lincoln stops the bike and looks at his Digivice, where information appears. Dash 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 dash. Hackmon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Mini Dragon. Attack. 5th Rush. Dash 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 dash. Lincoln asks, can we help you? Hackmon answers in a male voice, are you the other humane, who travels in this world? Lincoln looks out of the corner of her eye at Lady Digivolution, who shrugs her shoulders, saying, yes that's me. Hackmon says, my partner wants us to duel. Kudamon asks, who is your partner? A female voice that Lincoln knows just fine says, that's me. Lincoln narrows his eyes and says, Ronnie Ann. Ronnie Ann comes out of a bush with a grin and says, sub bad luck lame-o. Lincoln gets off the bike and asks, what are you doing here? Ronnie Ann says, have fun, these fights are really fun. Lincoln says, are you just fighting? Ronnie Ann says, of course, what else should these Digimon be good for? Lincoln squeezes his fists tight and asks, how long have you been here, when was the first time you came into this world? Ronnie Ann says, 1 week. Lincoln says, and you only see Digimon as a game. They are living beings, they have to eat, sleep, drink, they can bleed, they do not exist to bring you fun by fighting, they are good friends, but you can do that do not understand. Ronnie Ann frowns and says, I do not care, besides, I am very surprised that you are here, so I can embarrass you in this world, Hackmon attack. Lincoln says, Kudamon. Kudamon jumps out of the way and Hackmon flies full against a tree. Kudamon loads a holly shoot and shoots him at Hackmon, who is just dodging. Hackmon tries to attack again, but Kudamon evades without any problems. She slips under Hackmon and shoots a holly shoot from below on him. Hackmon flies in the air, by the power of holly shoot. Before Hackmon touches the ground again, Kudamon shoots another holly shoot at him. Because Hackmon is in the air, he cannot dodge, so he is hit head-on when Hackmon hits the ground. He tries to get up again, but always falls to the ground again. Ronnie Ann has one look of disbelief and says, as she calls Hackmon into her Digivice, this is not over lame-o. With that she runs away as, Lincoln says, good work Kudamon. Kudamon nods and says, is not a problem. Lincoln turns to Lady Digivolution and says, sorry you had to watch this. She says, it's okay, you fought well Kudamon. Kudamon says, thanks. Lincoln gets back on the bike and says, let's drive back. Lady Digivolution gets back on the bike and Kudamon sits back in front of Lincoln. Lincoln starts the engine and drives back to the guild. Chapter 24. Author Pav. Lincoln is in school today, sitting with Stella and girl Jordan at a table in the cafeteria. The three conversing as a red-haired boy approaches the table, it's Chandler. He approaches and slams his hands on the table. The three look to him and Lincoln asks, annoyed, what do you want Chandler? He answers with a grin, I just wanted to ask if you can lend me money. Lincoln narrows his eyes and says, no Chandler, if I lend you money, I'll never get it back. Chandler moves closer to Lincoln, cracking his knuckles and saying, maybe I have to rewrite the sentence, I mean, give me your money. 3 of Chandler's henchmen come to his side and Lincoln gets up. He is not afraid, he almost fights daily against a raven samurai. But he does not want to have problems with the school. So while the entire cafeteria thinks Lincoln gives them the money, he turns around, puts his hands in his jacket pockets, and walks away, most of them looking at him in bewilderment, but Chandler is angry that Lincoln is not afraid of him. Unaware that someone is filming the two, Chandler runs towards Lincoln, but for Lincoln it seems like the world is slowing down. He hears Chandler running towards him, he closes his eyes and dodges, with a step to the side. Chandler, who did not expect that, runs past him and flies to the ground. Lincoln does not care and goes on, much to Chandler's dissatisfaction, he grits his teeth and says, get him. The 3 henchmen of Chandler also run to Lincoln, but he stops and dodges a blow that would have hit his back if he had not dodged. He leans back and avoids with that a blow, but this one hits the guy, who wanted to hit Lincoln in the back. The one henchman who was hit in his face says to the other, what the hell man? The puncher says, sorry, I did not want that. While the two are fighting, the next henchman comes running from behind TTO Lincoln. Of course, Lincoln noticed that and jumps over him, much to the astonishment of each student. The henchman looks up at the flying Lincoln, and does not pay attention to where he runs full into his 2 mates. The 3 guys are lying on the floor when Lincoln lands, turns around and asks, in a somewhat taunt tone, sure you still want to try to beat me? The 3 guys look up and grate their teeth, but then they grin, that's because they see Chandler sneaking up on Lincoln with a food tray in his hand. But if you think Lincoln does not notice, you're wrong. Just as Chandler strikes, Lincoln catches the food tray and turns around. Chandler has a shocked look on his face as Lincoln drives the food tray out of his hand. Chandler stumbles and falls on his 3 henchmen. Lincoln puts the food tray back on a table and looks at the 4 boys. Everyone in the cafeteria has a shocked expression and then the door to the cafeteria opens. Principal Huggins, Coach Pikowski and Ms. Johnson come to the cafeteria and of course it looks bad for Lincoln as he's in the middle and the 4 guys are on the floor. Huggins says, loud. He marches to Lincoln and asks, what happened here? Lincoln begins to explain, Chandler and his henchmen started attacking me, but I did not fight back. Of course, Chandler and his henchmen do not want to be annoyed themselves and lie. Chandler says, that's not true, he attacked us. Ms. Johnson says, Lincoln, it does not look good for you because the 4 are lying on the floor and you have no injury to your body. Huggins says, come with me, loud. Just as Huggins wanted to go say a voice, Principal Huggins, Lincoln does not lie. It is Haiku. Huggins stops to turn to her and asks, do you have any evidence? Haiku shows him her cell phone showing a video where Chandler and his henchmen are trying to attack Lincoln, who only dodges and does not fight back. Coach Pikowski says, you guys are coming with us. Huggins turns to Lincoln and says, sorry I did not believe you. Lincoln says, it's okay. Huggins nods and leads the 4 boys out of the cafeteria. Lincoln goes to Haiku and says, thank you for helping me. Haiku nods and says, no problem, I find it terrible how the others treat you. Lincoln scratches his head and gives a weird smile as he says, I can handle that, especially since I've found new great friends. Haiku gives a rare smile as she looks at Lincoln and notices his digivice on his belt. She points and asks, you have one too? When she shows him hers, Lincoln's eyes widen and he says, that may sound weird, but did a strange animal come with this device? Haiku nods and says, you mean a Digimon, the name of mine is Doraemon. Lincoln looks at Haiku and says, we'll meet after school, I'll explain everything to you. Chapter 25. Author Pav. Lincoln, Haiku, Stella and girl Jordan are sitting in the living room of the Spartans and drinking tea. At least Haiku and Lincoln, Stella and girl Jordan have just arrived. Lincoln has explained what he knows about the digital world. Amazingly, Haiku was quite open-minded with the whole thing. Doraemon is next to Haiku, and what has astonished Lincoln is that this Doraemon is the same as he knows. Kudamon is next to Lincoln. Lincoln looks at Stella and girl Jordan as he asks, how is Freeman and Gummymon? The two smile and Jordan says, yes, we have something to show. Stella says, come out. Two lights come from the Digivices and two Digimon are there. Jordan says, the two are Digivolved. Stella says, this is Lyleman. Lyleman says, hey guys. Lyleman. LVL, rookie. Type Holy Beast. Attack. Leo Claw. Jordan says, and this is Terriermon. Terriermon says, hello, not seen for a long time. Terriermon. LVL, rookie. Type. Animal. Attack. Terrier Tornado. Kudamon says, MHH, it's nice that you digivolved yourself. Lyleman says, yes, that's really great. Jordan asks, so Lincoln, has anyone joined the Spartans? Lincoln puts his hand on his chin and says, you already know Vajramon and Karadenman. There are two new ones, Cutemon, it has come into the human world in my room. I got to know it and it helped me to get a Digimon back into the digital world. And then there's Lady Digivolution. I found her when I was working on my bike. She was injured, I brought her here and since then she's been a member. Quote. Stella asks, wait, bike? Lincoln nods and says, yes, I found a motorcycle a few days ago and fixed it. Haiku asks, can you ride a motorcycle? Lincoln replies, now I can. It turned out that the bike I found is teaching someone to drive it. Jordan asks, has anything happened? Lincoln frowns and says, yeah, on my first bike ride, Ronnie Ann came out of the bushes with a Digimon and challenged me to fight. She loves watching Digimon fight against each other, it's a lot of fun for her. Stella, Haiku and Jordan are in shock, but soon start to shake with anger. Jordan says, what does she think who she is? Stella says, always this stupid, I'm the toughest person here, fear me. Haiku says, I may have met the Digimon only 3 days ago, but even I know these creatures are not just for the fight, they're good friends. Kudamon smiles and says, I think it's good that you have already understood that. Haiku nods and says, thanks. The door opens and Lady Digivolution enters the room. She sees the three girls and says, hello Lincoln, who are your friends? Lincoln points to the three, these are Stella, girl Jordan and Haiku. He points to Lady Digivolution and says, this is Lady Digivolution. Lady Digivolution's eyebrow twitches as she says, nice to meet you. The girls close their eyes and each one of them twitches an eyebrow as they say, likewise. Kudamon notices the tension and says to Lincoln, Lincoln, you should maybe get some more tea. Lincoln looks at the pot and sees that the tea is empty. He says, yeah, I'll be back soon. With that he leaves the room. Lady Digivolution sits down and the four girls throw nasty looks at each other. Kudamon sighs and says, listen, you four. The four looks to Kudamon and she says, it's pretty obvious you all have a crush on Lincoln. Stella looks away and says, I do not know what you're talking about. Lyleman says, I've already noticed there's no denying Stella. Terriermon says, you too Jordan. Haiku sighs and says, it's true since that one night I cannot get Lincoln out of my head. Lady Digivolution says, I'll admit it, I like Lincoln. She looks at the three girls and says, that's why I will not give it to you, but I'll give you some information. Stella asks, what? Lady Digivolution smirks and says, I'm ready to share. Chapter 26. Author Pav. It's a sunny day in Royal Woods. Lincoln and Kudamon are not at home right now because they're buying some groceries, but what's amazing is that Kudamon is not on Digivice but on Lincoln's shoulder. They both realize that Kudamon looks almost like a weasel, so if anyone asks, they say that Kudamon is a weasel. But at the loud house, a certain blonde girl in a pink dress plans something. She sneaks into the garage and turns everything upside down. In her search, it's Lola. She says, where's the damn thing? She is looking for Cutemon, but she does not find it, but understandable because Cutemon is in the digital world. Lola keeps searching but a voice says, what are you doing here, sister unit? Lola is frightened and looks in the direction of the voice. She sees Lisa standing at the door looking into the garage. Lola exhales in relief and says, I'm looking for this stuffed animal Lincoln had here. Lisa raises an eyebrow and asks, you're looking for a stuffed animal? If I'm not wrong, you have a lot of these stuffed animals, why do you need this one? Lola says, because it's super cute. Lisa says, and that gives you the right to break into the room of our brother. Lola scoffs and says, so please, as if this bad luck charm is our brother. Lisa rolls her eyes and says, even if you do not want it, he is still our brother, by blood and flesh. Lola says, unfortunately, but I do not see him as a brother, he's just a bad luck charm. A voice that sounds very annoyed says, oh really? The two freeze and look in the direction of the voice behind Lisa as Lincoln, who glares at the two. Lola says, nervously, oh hey Lincoln. Lisa says, hello, brother unit. Lola tries to get out of the situation, we're here because. Lincoln rolls his eyes and says, do not lie, I've heard the most, you do not find the stuffed animal, it's gone, that was a present. Lola sinks to her knees and she says, no. Lincoln rolls his eyes again, because of the dramatic things that Lola is doing here. Lisa looks over her brother's shoulder and sees Kudamon, she stares at it and says, brother unit, what's that creature on your shoulder? Lincoln and Kudamon look at each other and he says, this is Kudamon, she's a weasel. Lisa narrows her eyes and says, this weasel looks different from other species, maybe it's a new breed. Lincoln narrows his eyes and asks, annoyed, what do you mean by that? Lisa clears her throat and says, brother unit, it would be nice if you temporarily give me this weasel for my research. Lincoln's eye starts to twitch and he says, Lisa, I'm not going to give you Kudamon for your research, because I know you're going to do anything with her that I'm not going to like. Lisa straightens her glasses and says, I will not do any dangerous experiments on your pet. Lincoln says, yeah, I do not believe you, you even make dangerous experiments with Lily. Lisa says, they are not that dangerous. Lincoln and Lola say, yes they are. Lisa says, fine, I admit my experiment may be extreme sometimes. Lola says, sometimes. Lincoln says with a bored look, Lisa, one of your experiments once turned the roof. Lisa does not really know what to answer and says, there must be sacrifices. Lincoln says with a sigh, Lisa, you do not get Kudamon, and Lola, it makes no sense to look for the cuddly toy, so get out of here. He points to the door and they both leave the garage. After they leave, Lincoln drops onto the bed and says, is this stressful? Chapter 27, Author Pav. Lincoln is currently driving through the digital world on his motorcycle. Why? Well, Lincoln has a bad feeling with Ronnie Ann and wants to observe her. So he drives around and tries to find her. He is afraid that she orders Hackmon to kill other Digimon who do not deserve it. Kudamon is not there, but Lincoln can defeat Ronnie Ann himself through the entire training with Karadenman. In addition, the Spartans want to do a movie night today. Lincoln is looking forward to that, especially because they want to grill. Lincoln drives on for a while, until he sees someone sitting on the edge of the road. His Digivice, which is attached to the handle, lights up and infos are displayed. Kazimon. LVL. Hybrid. Type. Fairy. Attack. Tempest Twist. Lincoln looks confused and says, level, hybrid. This is new. Lincoln presses the brake and stops in front of Kazimon, who looks up and sees Lincoln getting off the bike. He asks, everything okay? Kazimon nods and says, yes, why? Lincoln says, I was just worried, not everyone is sitting on the edge of the road, I thought you might have been hurt. Kazimon giggles and says, I'm sorry that I'm disturbing you, that was not my intention, I just rested here. Lincoln nods and says, that's good then. But he still wonders what level hybrid means. Kazimon seems to notice and asks, is something wrong? Lincoln says, sorry if that's a stupid question, but my Digivice said you're a level hybrid Digimon, I just wanted to know what that is. Kazimon nods, smiles and says, I think it's good that you want to know something like that, level hybrid is almost like level champion. Lincoln nods and says, I see. Kazimon turns her head to the side and asks, by the way, I'm Kazimon and you. Lincoln holds out his hand and says, Lincoln, nice to meet you. Kazimon shakes his hand and says, likewise, I'm Kazimon. Lincoln looks around and asks, you may not have seen a human girl with dark skin, black hair worn in a ponytail, freckles on her cheeks, and two buck teeth that stick out of her mouth. Kazimon frowns and says, are you friends with her? Lincoln shakes his head and says, not anymore, especially since I saw her here a few days ago. She thinks it's funny that Digimon fight each other, which I do not think so. I wanted to be watching her, so that she doesn't do things she will regret, but I don't find her. Kazimon smiles and pulls Lincoln into a hug so that his head is in her breasts. She says, "Glad you think so, and I saw your ex-friend." Lincoln moves away, with a red face, asking, "Really, where?" Kazimon says, "I saw her earlier, and she hunted some in training Digimon. I did not want to let that happen, so I shot her and her Digimon into a river." Kazimon expects a bad reaction, but is surprised when Lincoln begins to laugh out loud and says, "That's really good work Kazimon, you're really a fairy." Kazimon blushes a little and says, "Thanks." Lincoln says, "So, would you like to come along?" Kazimon asks, "Where to?" Lincoln says, "To the house of mine and my friends, we want to do a movie night today, would you like to come along?" Kazimon asks, "Sure, your friends are okay with that?" Lincoln waves it off and says, "Sure, especially if they find out what you did." Kazimon smiles and says, "Then I would like to come with you." The Digivice lights up and the light flies to Kazimon and gives her the sign of Spartans on one of her gloves. Kazimon looks at her glove and asks, "What happened just now?" Lincoln says, "You are now a member of the Spartans, my group of Digimon. We are all good friends, they will like you, would you like to ride with me on my motorcycle?" Kazimon says, "Sure." Lincoln nods and gets on the bike. Kazimon sits behind him and hugs him from behind. Lincoln smiles and drives off. A while later, the two arrive at the guild and Lincoln parks the motorcycle. The two get off the bike and go inside. In the courtyard are already the other Spartans and girl Jordan, Stella and Haiku. Lincoln says, "Hey guys, may I introduce Kazimon?" Kazimon bows slightly and says, "Hello, nice to meet you." Black Vajramon says, "Let me guess, something funny has happened, or something cool, please tell it." Karadenman says, "I would like to hear it, too." Lincoln starts to laugh again and says, "You'll find the story funny." The rest of the day was laughed, grilled and watching movies. Time skip one day, noon. Lynn is currently training and is still angry with her brother. She is swinging her baseball bat and saying, "Stupid bad luck, stupid brother." This goes on for a few more minutes. She hears Hoef. She turns around and is greeted with a big creature. The creature says, "You human child, I seek the true warrior with the sacred Digimon of whom I have heard so much." Lynn, as she always is, thinks it's Lincoln in a costume and she says, "What do you want, Stinkin'?" The creature looks confused and says, "I do not know what you're talking about, human, I'm Vajramon." Chapter 28. Author Pav. Lynn turns her eyes annoyed and says, "Vajramon, what's that stupid name?" That's what Vajramon says and he says, "I'm warning you, human child, do not test me, I just want to know where the true warrior is with sacred Digimon." Lynn goes into an assault position and says, "Okay Stinkin', if you want to find your true warrior, you have your true warrior here." Lynn runs towards Vajramon and begins to attack it, but it does not really feel it. A few moments later, Lynn gets tired and says, "Are you giving up?" Without saying anything, Lynn is struck aside by Vajramon. She lies down on the ground and Vajramon turns his back to her and says, "Arrogance is like a storm and you're lost in it." Lynn lies on the floor, her teeth crunching. She looks around and finds a piece of broken glass. She picks it up and says, "I do not understand why mom did not abort you." She gets up and rushes to Vajramon, who is still standing with his back to her. She arrives at Vajramon and stabbed him with the shard of glass in the hind leg. Blood splatter from the open wound and Vajramon cries out. But Lynn made a mistake. She upset the bowl. He turns and looks at Lynn with hatred. Now even Lynn is scared and takes a few steps back, but the damage is already done. Without losing a word, Lynn is beaten into the next wall. Vajramon snorts and leaves as Lynn lies in the wall with broken bones and unconscious. But someone heard the crash, and that someone is Margot, Lynn's best friend. Just as she turns the corner, she sees the hole in the wall where smoke rises. As she runs to the hole, she stops in shock. She sees her best friend in the hole, with broken bones and unconscious, but she hears her a bit mumble, "Bad luck," over and over. Margot does not lose time and calls an ambulance. Meanwhile with Lincoln, girl Jordan, Stella, Haiku and Kudamon were just in the mall and spent the day. Everyone has a milkshake in their hands and they're just heading to Lincoln's house. They talk and have fun. But what Lincoln does not know that the girls have agreed that they share him. The five are just arriving at the house when they see the family coming quickly out of the house. Lori sees Lincoln and yells, "Lincoln!" Lincoln rolls his eyes and says to the girls, what should I have done now? Lori and Lynn Sr. go to Lincoln and his dad asks, Lincoln, where have you been? Lincoln answers, in the mall. Lori asks, was that after you broke your sister's bones? Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, what? Lynn Sr. says, Junior is in the hospital, we just got a call and you were the only one not here, you and your bad luck. Lincoln narrows his eyes and says, I did not do that. Lori asks, do you have proof? Jordan is the first to say something, he was with us all the time. Stella says, yeah, we were in the mall all day. Lori says, oh really, then people will be able to testify. Haiku says, yes they can, you just have to ask. Lincoln says, should not you drive to the hospital? Lynn Sr. says, Lincoln is right, come on Lori, we'll take care of it later. The two go to Vanzilla and the family leaves. Kudamon asks, what do you think happened? Lincoln shrugs and says, maybe an opponent team. Stella says, I have the feeling that Kudamon has a guess. Kudamon looks at Stella and says, you're right. Lincoln asks, so Kudamon, what's your guess? Kudamon answers, I think a Digimon did that. Jordan asks, why should it do that? Kudamon says, just as I know Lynn, she probably annoyed it. Lincoln says, true. Haiku asks, so what are we going to do now? Jordan says, probably looking for the Digimon. The voice of Lyleman comes from Stella's Digivice, I think that's not necessary. Stella asks, why? Lyleman answers, because it's over there. The five look around and see a few feet away, Vajramon looking at the five. It comes to them and says, you are the true warrior with the sacred Digimon. He points to Lincoln. Vajramon draws his swords and says, fight me. Chapter 29. All pictures, products and if I make allusions to anime, series and games do not belong to me. Author Pav. As Vajramon runs to Lincoln and his friends, with drawn swords, Lincoln quickly pulls his bow and blocks the two swords, but with a lot of effort. Lincoln looks at the girls and says, go away. The three listen to his advice and leave quickly. Lincoln pushes his bow against the swords and jumps away, through the short window of time where Vajramon has to regroup himself. Lincoln asks, why do you want to fight me and who are you? Vajramon answers, I am Vajramon and I have heard a lot about you, a human who is friends with many Digimon and should be strong. I want to fight against you and see how strong you are, that you could block my attack is very impressive. Haiku looks at her Digivice and sees the info about Vajramon. Vajramon. Level. Ultimate. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Terra Blade. Stella, who also looks at Haiku's Digivice, sees Vajramon on level ultimate and says, Lincoln, Vajramon is on level ultimate. Lincoln nods, looks at Kudamon and asks, are you ready? Kudamon nods and says, always. Kudamon jumps off Lincoln's shoulder and Lincoln holds out his Digivice and says, Digivolution. Kudamon starts to shine and transforms, she says, Kudamon digivolves to Repamon. Vajramon says, the light of Digivolution. Lincoln says, do not know what that means, are you ready Repamon? Repamon nods and says, as I said, always. Lincoln smiles and says, let's give him our best shot, go. Repamon says, of course, Razor Wind. Repamon shakes its tail and releases a blade of wind. But what shocks both is that Vajramon simply cuts the attack. Vajramon says, I admit, if I had not paid attention, this attack would have hurt me. Lincoln says, Repamon, try again. Repamon appears before Vajramon and says, Lion Claw. Repamon starts scratching Vajramon with her claws, it seems to work, but Vajramon blocks the attack, but it has gotten damaged but unfortunately only slight damage. Repamon is still blocked by Vajramon's sword, but he raises his second sword and Lincoln notices what he's up to. He says, Repamon, get away. Repamon jumps away, but unfortunately too late, she is struck, with the sword, at the side. Lincoln says, with concern, Repamon. Vajramon says, Diva Blade. He crosses his swords and fires an energy beam at Repamon, who hits and she is thrown back a few feet. Lincoln runs to Repamon lying on the floor, he goes to her and says, Repamon. Vajramon says, I admit that you are somehow strong, but that's not enough to defeat me. Vajramon goes to Lincoln and Repamon, and Lincoln says to Repamon, "Everything will be fine, Repamon, I'm not going to let him hurt you anymore." Repamon says, "Lincoln, do not do that." Repamon throws Lincoln out of the way as another attack from Vajramon hits her. Just as Vajramon wants to strike again, Lincoln jumps with his bow in front of him and blocks the attack. The attack is so hard that even sparks fly. Vajramon asks, "Why are you doing this?" Lincoln says, "Why should not I do that?" Vajramon asks, "What do you mean?" Lincoln says, "I'm not going to let you hurt my partner and my friend anymore. The way Repamon protects me, so I'll protect her too. We're friends, and if she cannot go anymore, I'll do everything I can to protect her." A white light shines from Lincoln's Digivice and Repamon starts to glow. Vajramon asks, "What happens?" A vote from the Digivice says, "Matrix Digivolution." Repamon says, "Repamon Digivol too." Repamon grows bigger and you grow 2 wings, she says, Chirinman. Stella looks at her Digivice and sees the info about Chirinman. Chirinman. Level. Ultimate. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Wind Cutter Sword. Lincoln says, "You're at your ultimate level." Chirinman nods and says, "That's right, and thanks for your nice words, but I'll keep going." Lincoln walks away and Vajramon says, "This is going to be interesting, come on." Chirinman flies up into the air, so high that you cannot see her anymore. But she screams, "Wind Cutter Sword." She comes flying down at high speed and Vajramon holds his swords in front of him. Chirinman flies her horn towards Vajramon and in an instant, Chirinman is behind Vajramon. It looks like nothing happened, but shortly afterwards, Vajramon's swords fall to the ground and he as well. The fight is decided, Chirinman is the winner. Lincoln and Chirinman go to Vajramon as he says, "You have defeated me, are you going to give me the last blow?" Lincoln shakes his head and says, "No, I do not want that, you just wanted to fight, but this is not a fight that should go to the death, I'd like to become your friend." Vajramon is shocked and asks, "Why? I was ready to kill." Chirinman says, "This is Lincoln for you, but he's a nice person and he likes to befriend." Lincoln holds out his hand and Vajramon gratefully accepts it. Vajramon asks, "What's your name?" Lincoln says, "I'm Lincoln." Vajramon smiles and says, "It's nice to meet you, I'd like to accept your friendship." Lincoln nods and says, "Gladly." The emblem of Spartans appears on the shoulder armor of Vajramon. Lincoln asks, "I have one more question." Vajramon asks, "That would be?" Lincoln asks, "Do you have a girl with brown hair and a red jersey, injured?" Vajramon says, "Yes I did, she hurt my leg, why the question?" Chirinman starts laughing and Lincoln says, "Not important, but good job." Chapter 30. Author Pav. Lincoln is currently in class. Vajramon now lives in the guild with the others and they have become good friends. Back to Lincoln, the class is about to start when Mrs. Johnson enters the class and says, "Class, we have a new student, come in." A boy comes in the class wearing a cap. Mrs. Johnson says, "Introduce yourself." The boy says, "I'm Mark, nice to meet you." Mrs. Johnson nods and says, "All right, Mark, just sit on a seat." Mark nods and heads for a vacant seat in front of Lincoln. Lincoln notices this and says, "Hi Mark, I'm Lincoln Loud, nice to meet you." Lincoln holds out his hand to shake hands and Mark accepts the gesture and says, "Hello Lincoln, nice to meet you." During class, Mark thinks, so that's the human I'm supposed to watch for the 4 holy beasts and see if he's pure-hearted. The bell for the lunch break rings and most children are already running out of class. Mark is still sitting in his place when someone taps him on the shoulder. He turns and is greeted with the face of Lincoln, who asks, "Hey Mark, would you like to come along to the cafeteria?" This surprised Mark, he did not think that he asks him, they know only since this morning, he asks, "Why do you ask me?" Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, "Why should not I?" Mark answers, "We do not know each other." Lincoln says, "I know and that annoys me, you look like a nice guy, I want us to be friends." Mark smiles and says, "Then I would like to come, does anyone come with us?" Lincoln nods and says, "Yes, my friend Stella, girl Jordan and Haiku." The rest of the break, they talked and learned stuff about each other. When Lincoln, Mark, girl Jordan and Stella were on their way to class, a certain dark-skinned boy saw them, it's Clyde. He says to his friends Liam, Rusty and Zach, Lincoln seems to have found new friends. The other three are looking in the direction of Lincoln, and Rusty says, then they'll just get his bad luck, should not we warn them. Zach holds his hands in front of him in a stop motive and says, and risk bad luck falling on us, no way. Liam says, that's right, I do not want to risk that. Clyde looks at his ex-friend and says, but he seems so happy, much more than with us. At this moment, the four go into the class and thus out of sight of Clyde and the others. In the evening you can see how Mark goes to a TV and is sucked in. When he arrives in the digital world, he transforms into a Digimon, he becomes like a monkey. A powerful voice, behind him, asks, Makuramon, what information do you have about this human? Mark, who is in really a Digimon with the name Makuramon. -- Makuramon. LVL, Ultimate. Attack. Primal Orb. Type. Holy Beast. -- Turns around and says, Lincoln is a very nice person, so far I cannot complain. Another powerful voice asks, Lincoln. Makuramon says, this is the name of the human, my lord. Another powerful voice asks, did you contact Vajramon? Makuramon nods and says, I've talked to him, he thinks Lincoln is a nice person and cares for the well-being of others. Another powerful voice says, what do you think? The second voice says, I would wait, I want to know how his Digimon is evolving, then we will decide. To be continued. Sorry, for the short chapter, I have to get used to it again first. But I have a question, in which of these three Digimon would you change? And please a honest answer, not just the last one because he's powerful. Strabimon. Flammon. Whitewargreymon. Chapter 31. All pictures, products and if I make allusions to anime, series and games do not belong to me. Author Pav. In the digital world, one of the four sovereign is just thinking about our friend Lincoln. The one who thinks is Zuchowman, the bird sovereign. He doubts that Lincoln is pure-hearted and has an idea. Zuchowman. LVL. Mega. Type. Holy Bird. Attack. Kuan. He calls, Sandiramon, I have a job for you to come here immediately. Some moments later, a giant snake-like Digimon comes into the room. He says, yes master. Sanadramon. LVL. Ultimate. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Venom Axe. Zuchowman says, I want you to kidnap one of the sisters from the human boy we supervise, I want to find out something. Sanadramon nods and says, I'm leaving immediately, master. With that Sanadramon snakes out of the room and sets off. In the human world, Lola and Lala are in the park playing games. Not far from them is Lincoln taking a walk. It is actually peaceful until Lana notices that a shrubbery rustles. She approaches, Lola notices this and asks, what are you doing there? Lana says, something is rustling here, come here. Lola rolls her eyes and goes to her sister and says, I do not know what's going to be so good he. Lola is interrupted as a white tail from the bushes and she and Lana rapped. They are pulled and the two see Lincoln with his hands in his pockets, both yelling, Lincoln. Help. Lincoln looks in the direction of the two and sees that they are tied by a white tail. Lincoln's eyes widen and he says, wait, I'm coming. Lincoln runs to the two but the kidnapper is also on the way. Lincoln has a good idea of what the kidnapper is, for him it's a Digimon. Lincoln continues to run after the kidnapper until the kidnapper disappears into a cell phone. Lincoln does not wait long when he pulls out his Digivice and follows the kidnapper into the phone. Arrived in the digital world, Sanadramon is already waiting for Lincoln, who now stands in front of him. Lola asks, Lincoln, what's going on? I'm scared. Lana says, normally I would like to see such a big snake, but please help us. Sanadramon looks at the twins and says, be quiet human SSSS. Lola says horrified, it can talk. Sandiramon says, I can, and now be quiet, if you want to live. Lola gulped and now remains silent, but she is still in great fear. Lana is not really that different in this situation. Sanadramon looks at Lincoln and says, so you're the human boy I've heard of, so if you want your sisters back, you have to defeat me. Lincoln narrows his eyes and says, what's in it for you? Sanadramon says, I have my instructions. Lana realizes that Lincoln is not really scared and says to Lola, Lola, we have to tell him the truth. Lola says, we cannot, I'm scared. Lana nods and says, that's right, but that could be the last time we see him and I do not want him to hate us forever. Lola thinks for a moment, then nods. Lola looks in the direction of Lincoln and screams, Linky, we have something to tell you. Lincoln says, cannot wait that. Lana says, no, just listen. Lola continues, Lynn forced us to hate you, she meant if we did not ignore you, she would hurt us. Lana says, I'm sorry we were silent about that for so long, but I want my bro back. Lola says, I want my knight back in glowing armor. The two then yell, please do not hate us. Lincoln's eyes are covered by his hair as he says, what are you saying? The two twins look confused but Lincoln continues, I could never hate you. Lincoln gets his bow and digivice out when he says, you are my little sisters and I will save you. A white light appears from his digivice as he says, Kudamon, Matrix Digivolution. The voice of Kudamon can be heard as she says, Kudamon Digivolve to Repamon. Repamon Matrix Digivolution to Chirinman. Before Sanadramon can respond, the twins have escaped from captivity by Lincoln and Sanadramon says in a confused tone, what the heck? Sanadramon is confused where his hostages go, but sees that Lincoln and Chirinman have landed on a slope and put the two children there. Lana and Lola look at their big brother and Lola asks, Lincoln, what's going on? Lincoln looks at his two little sisters and says, I'll explain later. He looks at Chirinman and says, let's go, Chirinman. Chirinman says, alright. The two fly at high speed towards Sanadramon, ready to fight. Chapter 32. Chirinman flies at high speed towards Sandaramon as Lincoln jumps off his back and hits his bow in the right half of Sandiramon's face. Meanwhile, Chirinman rammed full force against the body of Sandaramon. This pushes Sandaramon back and the blow from Lincoln sends his head towards the ground. Lincoln lands again on Chirinman and Sandaramon is now on the ground, but slowly gets up again. Sandaramon stares at them and thinks, I understand that Chirinman could push me back, but this boy. Where does he get that power from? It is enough for Sandaramon and fires his spear out of his mouth in the direction of Lincoln and Chirinman. Chirinman sees the deadly weapon on it to fly and evades, without big problems. The spear flies past the two and Lincoln says, he can fire spears. Chirinman flies around Sandaramon and says, it seems like that. The serious look on Lincoln's face disappears and a grin comes on. He says, it does not matter, you can dodge well with your speed, and I have an idea. He moves closer to Chirinman's ear and whispers his plan to her. Chirinman grins and says, good idea. Chirinman flies a bit slower and Sandaramon thinks that Chirinman is getting tired, so he fires another spear in the direction of the two. But what surprises him is that the spear flies by the two and Chirinman catches the spear in his mouth, turns it and sends it in his direction. Sandaramon tries to escape, but is hit by his own spear. Sandaramon twitches and his whole body hurts. Lincoln and Chirinman are flying over Sandaramon and Lincoln says, I do not want it to escalate any further, so flee. Chirinman says, or feel the consequence. Sandaramon does not think long and disappears. Chirinman lands alongside Lana and Lola and Lincoln dismounts. The twins run to him and hug him tight. Lincoln does not wait long and hugs them back. After a while, the three let go and Lala says, that was awesome, bro. Lola says, true, but what's up and what's that? She points to Chirinman. Lincoln takes a deep breath and starts to say, well, we're in the digital world right now, a world that still exists next to ours. The creatures of this world are called Digimon. Chirinman, there's a Digimon. He points to Chirinman, who nods and says, that's right, but Digimon can evolve, that's just one of my forms, for example. Chirinman glows and shrinks to the size of Kudamon. Lola is surprised and asks, is not this the animal you have with you? Lincoln nods and says, yes, but Kudamon is a Digimon, not an animal. Lana asks, how long have you known this world? Lincoln smiles and says, I've known this world for some time. Come, let's go home, I'll tell you more on the way home. At the lair of the sovereign, the four sovereign meet again and Azulongmon tells Zuchowman, Zuchowman, how dare you do such a thing? Zuchowman says, I had to take him my test. Ebenwoman says, and that's why you had to kidnap 2 of his sisters. Zuchowman nods and says, that was the easiest way. Baihuman says, do not talk nonsense, that was the easiest way for you, had we waited we'd see if he was pure-hearted. Azulongmon. LVL. Mega. Type. Holy Dragon. Attack. Sukai. Ebenwoman. LVL. Mega. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Muggin. Baihuman. LVL. Mega. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Congo. Sandiramon comes into the room and says, hello, master. Zuchowman looks at his servant and asks, Sandiramon, how has your mission passed? Sandiramon explains, the 4 Mega Digimon, the happenings that have happened. Azulongmon asks, what do you think the boy has a pure heart? Sandiramon says, he did not hate his little sisters, and even after I laid injured on the floor, he has spared me, if I may say, he has a pure heart. Silence prevails in the room as Zuchowman says, go. Sandiramon nods and says, of course my master. Sandiramon walks out of the room and leaves the 4 Mega Digimon there. Baihuman says, already 3 devas who believe in his pure heart. Azulongmon says, to be honest, I think so too. Ebenwoman asks, what will we do now? Baihuman says, I have a plan, but now let's wait. Chapter 33. Author Pav. Lincoln is driving through the digital world exploring a bit, but without Kudamon, she's just taking a break. After some time, Lincoln stops because he sees something interesting, a city ruin. Lincoln gets off the motorbike and goes into town. Many houses are run down and plants are growing everywhere. Lincoln runs his hand over one of the houses and says, there was no one here, at least not for a long time. Lincoln continues and arrives at a small round place with a fountain in the middle. Lincoln goes to the fountain and looks inside. The water that is in the fountain is all brown and you cannot see what lies on the bottom of the fountain. Lincoln looks around a bit and walks down a street. Just as he walks around a corner, in front of him is a mouse-like Digimon. The two stare at each other for a while. An awkward silence is in the air when Digimon asks, are you going to stand there all the time? Lincoln gets out his Digivice and looks at the info. Kumbiramon. LVL. Ultimate. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Diva Clone. Kumbiramon keeps looking at Lincoln and asks, hello. Lincoln shakes his head and says, sorry, I'm Lincoln. Kumbiramon raises an eyebrow, then smiles and says, Kumbiramon. So Lincoln, what are you doing here? Lincoln puts his hands in his pockets and says, I just wanted to do a little exploration tour, but then I found this city, what are you doing here? Kumbiramon looks at nothing and says, I'm trying to clear my mind. Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, with concern in his voice, what happened? Kumbiramon looks at the floor and says, I do not want to talk about it. Lincoln takes a step forward and kneels slightly, saying, Kumbiramon, look me in the eyes. Kumbiramon looks up into Lincoln's eyes and he says, Kumbiramon, if I've learned a thing, it's that you should talk about your problems. We've only known each other for a minute, but I'm ready to listen to you. Kumbiramon smiles and says, thanks. Lincoln sits down against a house and asks, so what's the problem? Kumbiramon sits down next to Lincoln and says, I'm in a group of strong Digimon, but I think I'm the weakest of us all. Lincoln looks at him and says, how do you expect that you are the weakest? Kumbiramon looks at Lincoln and says, I do not have a good attack. Lincoln asks, what can your attacks do? Kumbiramon says, I can divide myself into 6 parts and then attack, that's all I can do. Lincoln says, what are you saying? What you can do is extremely strong. Kumbiramon says, I do not know how that should be strong. Lincoln shakes his head and says, you do not understand, you can split, this is not an attack, but you have to be smart, you can attack well at this time, while your copies distract the enemy, you can attack. Kumbiramon looks up in astonishment and says, I've never seen it like that before. Lincoln smiles and says, and there are so many other options for your attacks. The two talk for a while and have fun until the sun goes down slowly. Lincoln gets up and asks, do you know what the history of this city is? Vajramon nods and says, yes, this city was once a beautiful big city with many Digimon. Lincoln looks around and says, hard to imagine. Vajramon continues, this city also had a queen. Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, a queen? Vajramon does not care about the breakers and goes on to say, the queen is said to have been a beautiful Digimon. Many Digimon wanted to marry her, but she rejected everyone. She only wanted to marry if it was true love. Lincoln smiles and says, that's good. Vajramon continues, but one day one of the rejected ones had enough. He enchanted her so that she sleeps forever. But there is a solution. The queen can be woken up by a kiss, but it was said that the kiss should not come from a Digimon, but from another entity. Lincoln raises an eyebrow and thinks, what a cliché. Vajramon thinks for a moment and says, Lincoln, you could do it. Lincoln raises an eyebrow and asks, I could do something. Vajramon says, you could help her, come on. Vajramon runs and Lincoln runs after. After a while, the two arrive in a throne room and in the middle is a table with a Digimon. Vajramon says, there she is, Queen Chessmon. Lincoln looks at his Digivice and info appears. Dash 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 dash. Queen Chessmon. LVL. Mega. Type. Puppet. Attack. Grand Cricket. Dash 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 dash. Vajramon lightly nudges Lincoln and says, go ahead. Lincoln asks, what should I do? Vajramon says, what did I say? How can you wake her up? Lincoln blushes slightly and says, you're not serious, are you? Vajramon says, Lincoln, you can help her, you're not a Digimon, a try is worth it. Lincoln looks at Queen Chessmon, sighs and goes to her. He leans toward her head and the lips of the two meet. The kiss is short but good. Lincoln asks, did it work? Vajramon says, it's hard to say, you do not see her eyes. Lincoln sweats drops at Vajramon and wants to say something, but a slight groan distracts him. He looks at Queen Chessmon who sits up slowly and asks, who saved me? Vajramon says, this human here. Queen Chessmon says, thank you from the bottom of my heart. She tries to get up, but falls, but is caught by Lincoln, who says, you're still weak, rest for now. Queen Chessmon asks, can I find out the name of my savior? Lincoln smiles and says, of course, I'm Lincoln Loud, your majesty. Queen Chessmon giggles and says, thank you my knight. Vajramon celebrates and says, Lincoln, you are really great. Chapter 34. Author Pav. It's a beautiful day at Royal Woods, but Lori is rather annoyed. Why? Because she just has to take care of Lynn, as she is in a full-body plaster. Lynn is not very happy that she is now paralyzed for several weeks. But Lori just does not like it either. She needs to take care of her more often. She would rather spend this time with Bobby. Lori has just finished feeding Lynn and Lynn is not happy at all and keeps trying to get up because she wants to teach her brother a lesson, but Lori keeps putting her to bed. Lynn says, Lori, let me up, I have to teach this bad luck charm a lesson. Lori shakes her head, narrows her eyes, and says, no, Lynn, I do not want you to hurt yourself anymore. I do not want to take care of you any longer than necessary. Besides, Lincoln was not the one who hurt you. Lynn looks at Lori with a venomous look and says, bullshit. It was him, why should not he be it? Lori rolls her eyes and says, because he was away all day with his friends, we even inquired at the mall and the sellers said he was there. Lynn says, he bribed them. Lori snorts and says, as if he has so much money. Lori takes the food tray and leaves the room. She goes down to the kitchen, puts down the dirty dishes and goes back to her room. She throws herself on her bed and looks around her room, nobody is there except her. But that does not really surprise her, she does not allow her siblings to go to her room, except for Lenny, but they share a room. Lori opens her cell phone and wants to start writing with Bobby, but on her display, a kind of eye is displayed. She tries to remove the eye by pressing the buttons on her phone, but nothing happens. At least not as she would like. Lori starts to light up and gets pulled into her cell phone. She screams as she gets pulled in and in a second she was there and now she is gone. Her cell phone falls onto the bed and stops glowing. When Lori lands in the digital world, she is in a forest. She looks around in panic and asks, what's going on here? Where am I? Lori looks around, but hears something under her, a voice says, that hurt. She looks down and sees that she is sitting on something, but it was not human. She jumps up and asks, "What are you?" The Digimon stands up and Lori sees it right now for the first time. It's a little green being with big feet and a small club in his hand. Dash 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 dash. Goblimon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Ogre. Attack. Goblin Strike. Dash 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 dash. Goblimon scratches his head and says, "You do not even apologize, even though you've landed on me." Lori says, "Sorry I landed on you." Goblimon scratches his head and says, "It's alright." Silence is in the air as Lori asks, "What are you and where am I?" Goblimon says, "I'm a Digimon, and you're in the digital world." Lori asks, "What is a Digimon?" Goblimon points to himself and says, "I am a Digimon, but there are many more." Lori asks, "Can you help me get back into my world?" Goblimon thinks for a moment, until he says, "I can help you if you help me." Lori asks, "How can I help you?" Goblimon points to a mountain and says, "My brother, he was kidnapped and I want to save him." Lori looks up at the mountain and asks nervously, "Sure I cannot help you any different." Goblimon shakes his head. Lori looks at him annoyed and says, "I'm just looking for someone else to help me." Lori wanted to go, but does not know in which direction. Goblimon says, "Good luck, not many Digimon are as nice as I am right now." Lori thinks for a while, rolls her eyes and goes in the direction of the mountain and says, "Come, let's save your brother." Goblimon smiles, runs in front of her and leads her. Lori, though she has no idea what to expect and what to do, follows the little Digimon towards the mountain. Chapter 35. Author Pav. It's a sunny afternoon in Royal Woods. Luna walks through the streets and kicks a can in front of her. She has her head on the ground and seems angry. She mumbles, "How can I convince my family I did not lie?" As she walks on, she continues to kick the can. She thinks of her brother and says, "Why cannot he just admit it would make things much easier?" Luna is still angry that her family did not believe that there is another world, with some weird creatures. Luna kicks the can a little harder without really realizing it. The can flies into an alley, a loud noise is heard and a voice that says, "Ouch." Luna puts her hands over her mouth and says, "Damn." She runs down the alley and says while she runs, "I'm so sorry. I was just mad." Luna stops because she is shocked by what she sees. In front of her floats a big gear, with two smaller gears on the side. It looks at Luna and says, "It's okay, but can you possibly reveal where I am?" Dash 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 dash. Vajramon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Machine. Attack. Cog Crusher. Dash 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 dash. Luna stares at the gear and says, "You're in the human world, who are you, dude?" The gear continues to look at Luna and says, "Sorry, I did not introduce myself, I'm Vajramon." For a few moments it is quiet and Vajramon asks, "So I am in the human world, but I would like to go back, do you know how to do that?" Luna thinks for a moment, until she thinks of something. She grins and says, "Yeah, I know how to do that, but I need one of my buddies for that, and I do not know where he is right now." Vajramon smiles and says, "I'm very grateful, but what should I do now?" Luna says, "I'll take you to a friend of mine, there you can wait." Vajramon nods and says, "Thank you." Luna takes one of the small gears and leads Vajramon to Sam's house. Vajramon is in Sam's garage right now, while Sam and Luna are talking in the kitchen. Sam says, "So wait, let me clarify that, your brother discovered a world with these weird creatures. You told your family and they did not believe you, so now you want me to keep this thing here, so you can prove something to your family." Quote. Luna nods and says, "Yes, that fits." Sam looks at her girlfriend weird and says, "Loons, do not you think you're overdoing it?" Luna says, "No Sam, you do not know what it feels like to be portrayed by your family as a liar." Sam sighs, lays a hand on Luna's shoulder and says, "Loons, I love you, but why do not you take Vajramon with you?" Luna shakes her head and says, "Sam, that will not work, as soon as Lincoln sees him, he will send him back. Please only for one night." Luna gives Sam a puppy look. Sam cannot resist that look and says, "Okay, but only for one night." Luna smiles and says as she makes her way to the door, "Thanks Sam, I'll be back tomorrow morning." Sam looks at the garage and says, what can happen? Sam goes up to her room and gets ready for bed. But Sam does not notice that something is going on in the garage. Vajramon starts to shine and says, Vajramon digivolves to, Vajramon grows taller and says, Vajramon. Vajramon. LVL, champion. Type, machine. Attack, grenade destroyer. The next morning, Luna goes to Sam's house and whistles to herself. She is very happy because she can finally prove it to her family, but the happiness vanishes quickly when she sees the garage of Sam and Sam in front of it. The garage door is completely destroyed. Luna runs to Sam and asks, Sam, are you okay? Sam turns to Luna and she does not seem happy. She says, I'm fine, but not the garage, I told you it was not a good idea. Luna flinches and says, I'm sorry, but I did not know that could happen. Sam crosses her arms and says, Luna, you want to prove to your family that you did not lie, go too far. Luna shakes her head and says, no, Sam, I'm sorry that's happened, but it's not going too far. Sam sighs and says, you are so stubborn, Luna, if you realize your mistake, I will not jam with you. Luna gasps and says, but Sam. Sam turns away and says, go Luna. Luna knows it can only get worse now and says, okay, see you later. Luna turns and walks towards her house. Meanwhile, in an alley, Vajramon is leaning against a wall, as a voice says, hey, what are you doing here, you're a Digimon. At the entrance of the lane is Lincoln. Vajramon turns to Lincoln and says, yes, I'm a Digimon, can you help me? Lincoln asks, where can I help? Vajramon says, I'd like to go back to the digital world. Lincoln nods and says, I can do that. Lincoln gets his phone out and his Digivice and sends Vajramon back to the digital world. Chapter 36. Author Pav. It is almost night when Lori and Vajramon climb the mountain. They have not spoken to each other since they left. Lori is thinking all the time about how she got into this situation. Because of the current situation at her home, she only comes up with one, for her, logical explanation. She blames Lincoln. Lori mumbles, "Your stupid bad luck, Lincoln." She did not expect Vajramon to hear her, but he turns his head in her direction and asks, "What did you say?" Lori crosses her arms and says, "I just complained about my brother." Vajramon looks at her confused and asks, "Why would you do that?" Lori scoffs and says, "Because it's his fault I'm here." Vajramon asks, "How is this his fault?" Lori says, "Bad luck." Vajramon thinks he got it wrong and says, "Pardon." Lori sighs annoyed and says, "He's bad luck." Vajramon looks at Lori dumbfounded and asks, "Who told you this nonsense?" Lori feels insulted and says, "It's true." Vajramon stops, turns around and says, "There is no such thing as luck, why do you think that your brother is bad luck?" Lori says, "Many bad things happened when he was with us." Vajramon says, "Have bad things happened before?" Lori is surprised by this question. She thinks about it and she does not think of anything like that, nothing bad happened before that. Lori says, "No." Vajramon asks, "Is he younger than you?" Lori says, "Yes." Vajramon points to Lori and says, "Then you should help him, talk to him, do not treat him like a disease." Lori nods and Vajramon turns around and walks on. He says, "We'll be there soon." Lori says, "Vajramon." Vajramon stops and looks questioningly at her. She says, "Thank you." Vajramon smiles and continues to walk. After a while, they arrive at a large spot and the two hide behind a rock. Lori and Vajramon look around the rock and see a big fire in the middle of the spot. And the Digimon on the spot are ghost-like Digimon. Bakemon. LVL, champion. Type, ghost. Attack, dark claw. Lori asks, "Are these ghosts?" Vajramon whispers to Lori, "I think you humans would call them that, but we call them Bakemon." Lori asks, "Where is your brother?" Vajramon looks around and sees a cage on the other side of the camp. In this cage is a big green Digimon with silver hair. Vajramon points to the cage and says, "There he is, there's Vajramon." Vajramon. LVL, champion. Type, ogre. Attack, pummel whack. Dash 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 dash. Lori asks, this is your brother. Goblimon nods and Lori looks back and forth between the two and says, if you look closer, you notice it. The two watch the camp and notice that 8 Bakemon are here. Lori asks, what's the plan? Goblimon says, could you distract the Bakemon? Lori asks, how should I do that? Goblimon says, you're fast as the Bakemon, they're pretty slow, while you distract them, I'll get my brother out of the cage. Lori tries to think of another plan, but she cannot think of anything. She sighs and says, okay, let's go. Lori runs out from behind the rock and runs in the opposite direction from the cage and shouts, grab me, you stupid Bakemon. And blows them a raspberry. This annoys the Bakemon and they track her. Meanwhile, Goblimon walks to the cage of Ogremon and says, hey, big brother. Ogremon is surprised to see his little brother here and asks, Goblimon, what are you doing here? Goblimon says, I'm here to help you, the human helped me. Goblimon goes to the castle and says, Goblin strike. And fires a small fireball at the lock of his cub. The lock shatters and the cage opens. Orgmon goes out and grabs his club a little further away. He pets Goblimon's head and says, good job, but now I have to take revenge. He goes to the Bakemon, who do not know that he is free. Lori is still running away from the Bakemon and shouts, can someone help me? The voice of Ogremon sounds behind the Bakemon, pummel whack. Dark energy comes out of his fist and hurls a Bakemon away. Ogremon says, thanks for the help human, but for rest I take over. Ogremon fights against the remaining 7 Bakemon and actually gets along well. Goblimon walks to Lori and she says, your brother can fight well. Goblimon says, I know. Ogremon yells, bone mace. And whacks a enemy with his club. This Bakemon flies to the ground to his comrades with a fat bump on his head. Ogremon notices something and says, hold on, that was only 6, where is the 7th? Without Lori or Goblimon noticing, a Bakemon sneaks up behind them. Ogremon notices and yells, watch out. But it's too late, the Bakemon is already too close and is about to pick Lori when a voice screams, Thunder of King. And a big thunder sizzles the Bakemon. The 3 are confused who that was and look in the direction where the thunder came from. There is a big lion with 2 tails. Dash 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 dash. Leomon. LVL. Champion. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Thunder of King. Dash 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 dash. A girl's voice asks, wait, are not you a sister of Lincoln? Lori sees this next to the lion. Stella is standing. Lori asks, are not you a friend of Lincoln? Stella asks, what happened? After a long explanation of what happened, Ogremon says, well, thank you for the rescue, but I and Goblimon need to move on. He takes Goblimon and puts him on his shoulder and begins to walk away. Goblimon waves to Lori and says, thanks. Lori waves back and Stella says, come on, I'll bring you back. The two start to walk to the nearest town with a portal. While on the way, Lori asks, so what's your relationship with my brother? Stella looks down a bit and says, friends. Lori says, I suppose you want to be more than friends. Stella says, what does that matter to you anyway? You hate Lincoln. Lori looks at the floor and says, I've realized my mistake, I'll talk to him soon. Stella says, good, and please do not tell anyone from the digital world. Lori says, of course. Stella's face blushes slightly and she says, and because of your question, yes, I want to be more than just friends. Lori squeaks and starts talking to Stella. Chapter 37. Author Pav. Lincoln and Kudamon are facing a problem, a really big one. The two have received a message, which is about a big Digimon that blocks a bridge. The bridge is important for trade between different villages. So Lincoln and Kudamon got on the bike and drove to the location. But once there, they face the problem. It's really a giant Digimon. Lincoln gets his Digivice out and gets the data from the Digimon. Dash 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 dash. Vajramon. LVL. Ultimate. Type. Holy Beast. Attack. Vajramon. Dash 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 dash. Lincoln looks up from his Digivice and says, the name of the Digimon is Vajramon. Kudamon looks at the gigantic Digimon and asks, how are we supposed to do that? Lincoln looks behind him and sees some Digimon looking desperate. Lincoln says to Kudamon, the Digimon, but look very desperate. Kudamon says, of course, they have to either go back to their village or sell their goods. Lincoln says, do we want to wake him up? Kudamon says, we probably have no other chance. The two go to the face of Vajramon and see that he somehow looks restless. The two take a deep breath and scream at the same time, wake up. The two watch as Vajramon slowly opens his eyes and asks, what's this screaming about? Vajramon looks at Lincoln and Kudamon and asks, why did you wake me up? Lincoln scratches his neck and explains, sorry we woke you, Vajramon, but you cannot sleep here. Vajramon looks at Lincoln with tired eyes and asks, why not? Kudamon says, your body blocks the bridge for the other Digimon, they must cross this bridge, this is the only one for miles. Vajramon slowly looks around and realizes that he is really blocking a bridge. He says, I did not notice, I'm sorry. Lincoln raises his hands and says, it's alright, but could you just clear the way and then we can talk. Vajramon grumbles and says, okay. Vajramon gets up and slowly moves to the side of the bridge and lets himself fall to the ground. The Digimon have been waiting to celebrate and make their way across the bridge. Lincoln and Kudamon approach Vajramon and Lincoln asks, why did you sleep there? Vajramon snorts and says, since I'm so tall, I cannot sleep well, wherever I lie down it's uncomfortable, I was so tired that I just fell asleep and did not realize I was lying in front of the bridge. Kudamon says, so you have sleep problems. Vajramon nods and says, yes. Lincoln puts one of his hands on his chin and thinks for a while until he thinks of something. He smiles and says, I have an idea. Lincoln whispers his plan into Kudamon's ear and she says, that could work. Lincoln and Kudamon swing on their motorcycles and Lincoln says to Vajramon, we'll be back soon. And drive away with the motorbike. Little time skip. After a while, Kudamon and Lincoln come back to Vajramon. The motorbike stops and Lincoln says, here we are again. Vajramon looks at the two in confusion and asks, what is your plan? By moment someone lands beside the motorbike, it's Vajramon. He says, so where should I help Lincoln? Lincoln points at Vajramon and says, Vajramon needs a place to sleep. I brought you because I want you to make a big crater with your Terra Destroyer. Vajramon says, how is that supposed to help? Kudamon explains, we'll lay out the crater with soft material so you can lie comfortably. Vajramon smiles and says, that might work. And so Vajramon, Kudamon and Lincoln set to work. While Vajramon makes the crater, Lincoln and Kudamon collect many leaves and tendrils that are soft enough to sleep on. Went faster than expected, only 2 hours. After work, Vajramon lies down in the crater and says, I have not been so comfortable for a long time. Lincoln, Kudamon and Vajramon are smiling as their work is done. Lincoln says, glad you like it, we'll be on our way again. Kudamon says, maybe we'll meet again. Vajramon closes his eyes and says, goodbye, my friends. With that Lincoln and Kudamon drive away and Vajramon flies alongside the two. When the three are already far away, Vajramon opens his eyes a little bit and thinks to himself, this boy is really nice, everyone else would have attacked me. Chapter 38. Lincoln and Kudamon explore the digital world again. You might think that it gets boring after a while, but there is a lot to discover. The two drive for a while until Lincoln sees something on the side of the road. It's a staircase. Lincoln stops and looks at the stairs and asks, an idea what that could be. Kudamon looks at Lincoln and says, could be a temple. Lincoln looks at the long stairs and says, shall we look at the temple? Kudamon nods and says, why not? Lincoln smiles and goes up the stairs. The stairs are well maintained, nowhere is dirt and no branch barred the way. When Lincoln arrives at the end of the stairs, he sees a large square. Lincoln and Kudamon are standing just under a stone gate and a path that leads to a small shrine. At the side of the path is a donation box and on the shrine is a canine statue. Lincoln goes to the shrine, he looks at the shrine and says, beautiful shrine. Kudamon looks at the statue and says, but the statue is a little bit odd. Lincoln looks at the statue as he focuses his eyes on the statue. The head of the statue moves and the statue says, I'm sorry, that I'm a little bit odd. Lincoln takes a step back through fright. But he calms down quickly and asks, are you a Digimon? The statue says, yes, I am Vajramon. Dash 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 dash. LVL, Ultimate. Type, Holy Beast. Attack, Swaboyana. Dash 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 dash. Kudamon sweat drops and says, sorry, we thought you were a statue. Kataramon rolls his eyes and says, you're not the first ones to think that, I'm not offended by it. Lincoln says with a nervous laugh, that's good, I'm Lincoln and that's my partner Kudamon. Kataramon jumps down from the roof and says, welcome Lincoln and Kudamon, if I may ask, what brings a human here? Lincoln says, I and Kudamon are looking around the digital world, there is so much to discover. Kataramon examines Lincoln and says, something very bad has happened to you, little boy. Sit down and talk to me. Lincoln thinks it will not hurt, sits down next to Kataramon and starts telling the story with the bad luck. The further the story goes, the more Kataramon is disgusted. When the story ends, Kataramon gets up and says, Lincoln, if you want I can punish your family, that would be justice. Lincoln looks at Kataramon, drops to the floor and says, nah. Kudamon is surprised and asks, what do you mean, nah? Kataramon says, I would like to know that too. Lincoln closes his eyes and says, it does not make a difference to me, they did not deserve punishment just because they were following a stupid rumor. Kudamon sighs and says, typically you Lincoln. Kataramon sighs, sits down and says, you are a strange person, Lincoln. I do not understand you. A female voice says, that's because you only care about justice. The click of high heels is audible and the voice says, but this sweet boy here is different, he has a pure heart. Lincoln opens his eyes and sees a female Digimon. Lincoln smiles and says, Lincoln loud, and who are you Miss Beautiful Fox? The Digimon giggles and says, I am Sakuyaman. Dash 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 dash. Sakuyaman. Level, Mega. Type, Wizard. Attack, Spirit Strike. Dash 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 dash. Chapter 39. Lincoln is currently darting across the paths of the digital world with his motorbike. He got an order from Vajramon, he should pick up something, but he is not sure what exactly. When he was in town Vajramon just came up to him and asked him for a favor. Lincoln did not have to think about it when he just said, yes, he has no reason to say no to Vajramon. Vajramon was happy and gave him a letter and the address where he had to go. Lincoln looks at the note with the address and mumbles to himself, I should be right there. Lincoln continues for a while until, to his surprise, he stops in front of a large garden. He dismounts and looks at the garden, he is beautiful. Lincoln shakes his head at the beautiful view and says, whoever created this garden knows what he's doing. Ignore the cat. Lincoln looks again at the note to confirm that he is right here. He puts the note back in his pocket and mumbles, maybe I'll find someone. He enters the garden, looking for someone. After a while, looking for someone and after walking along beside numerous flower beds, he finds someone. This person has his back to him and kneels on the floor, the person humming a little bit to himself, as Lincoln notes that the voice sounds girlish. Lincoln clears his throat and says, excuse me, please. The person seems to get stiff and turns around slowly. As that happens, Lincoln realizes that it's really a girl. But when she turns around completely and sees Lincoln, she gets up quickly and hides behind a statue, screaming. Surprising Lincoln, did he do anything bad? He walks slowly to the statue and says, sorry, did I do anything bad? The screaming has stopped and the girl looks out from behind the statue. She has pink hair and a white cap on her head. Before the girl can say something, another female voice is coming saying, get away from her. Lincoln just manages to jump backwards as someone lands on the stood where he stands. Another female figure is now standing in front of Lincoln. This girl has pink skin, black eyes, shoulder-length green hair, and white flower-shaped hands and feet, and 6 appendages on each hip, 3 in the front and the 3 in the back. It wears a yellow and green high-leg leotard with a wing-shaped decoration on the shoulders, a rose on its chest, and a giant pink lilac on its back, and a pink lilac-shaped hat. The girl wants to attack but Lincoln raises both his hands and says, calm down please, I'm here because Vajramon sent me. That seems to surprise both of them when Lincoln gets the letter out. He gives it to the girls and says, I'm sorry, I think I scared the girl behind the statue and just wanted to apologize. The girl with the pink lilac-shaped hat takes the letter and reads it. She smiles as she finishes and says, "Sorry I tried to attack you." "Blanc, come here." The girl behind the statue comes out, but she seems to be very shy. She stands next to the other girl and looks at the floor slightly. The girl with the pink lilac-shaped hat says with a smile, "I'm Lilymon and that's Sistermon Blanc, she's very shy." Lilymon. LVL, Ultimate. Type. Fairy. Attack. Lila Shower. LVL, Rookie. Type. Puppet. Attack. Divine Pierce. Lincoln smiles and says, "It's nice to meet you both. I'm Lincoln." Lilymon smiles back but Blanc just looks away. Lilymon notices this, sighs, puts a hand on her head and strokes her head, saying, "I'm sorry, she's really shy." Lincoln just smiles and says, "No problem, to be honest, that makes her even sweeter." Blanc's head turns crimson and a cloud of smoke hits her head. While Lilymon laughs and says, "You really are a charmer, but what do you think about me?" She poses with a pose like a supermodel. Lincoln blushes slightly and says, "You're really beautiful." Lilymon laughs and hugs Lincoln and kisses him on the cheek as she says, "You're really cute and sweet, Lincoln." Lincoln blushes and says, "Thanks." When Lincoln looks at Lilymon, he notices something pulls his sleeve. He looks at the original and sees Blanc standing there with a red face. She says, "Thank you for calling me sweet." And kiss him on the cheek, too. The three speeches for a while and get along very well. Lilymon completes the order from Vajramon and gives it to Lincoln, but he does not leave immediately, but helps a bit with the garden. Both seem to be happy and Blanc does not seem to be so nervous in his environment anymore. When Lincoln said goodbye and drove away, Lilymon says, "Did you have a crush on him as well?" Blanc looks at the floor and says, "Maybe." Lilymon says, "I think we're not the only ones." Blanc asks, "Will they share him?" Lilymon says, "I hope." Chapter 40. It's a sunny day in Royal Woods and Lynn seems motivated. Why? Because she is since 2 weeks out of her full-body bandage and can now play again. The sisters who still do not believe that Lincoln is not a bad luck, are happy for Lynn, but those who know that Lincoln is not a bad luck, are not happy, but they come anyway. Lola and Lana secretly hope that something bad happens to Lynn. In any case, the family is just on the way to the sports field where the game is played. Lynn grins, because she can play again. She hopes the bad luck charm will not show up. Meanwhile, Lincoln is resting in the garage and watching some movies with Kudamon. It's been a while since Lincoln's family left for the game. They're probably already at the game and it's probably already started. Lincoln and Kudamon watch the movie with complete interest, eating popcorn. Until a sound is heard from his Digivice. Lincoln looks puzzled at his Digivice, but his eyes widen in shock as he sees what is shown on it. A map of Royal Woods with a bunch of red dots on them and they are getting more and more. Kudamon also looks at the Digivice and says, "Lincoln, you know what we have to do." Lincoln looks at his partner and nods. Lincoln throws his jacket over and runs out of the garage. He gets his phone out and calls a number. It does not take long for someone to answer the call and says, "Hello." Lincoln says, "Girl Jordan. We have a problem." Girl Jordan answers, "I know, I've already seen it on the Digivice. Lincoln, what do we do?" Lincoln replies, "We have to fight the Digimon. Call Stella and Haiku, I'm on my way." Girl Jordan says, "Of course, see you there." Lincoln keeps on running, hoping to get there in time. Meanwhile, at the game of Lynn. The game is going bad for Lynn's team. It is already 4-0 for the opposing team. Lynn is about to score when a scream is heard. The scream distracts Lynn and lets her shoot the ball so that he crashes off the gate and hits Lynn Sr. in the face. The rest of the family flinch as that happens, but look in the direction of the scream. The scream comes from the goalkeeper of Lynn's team lying on the ground floor and in front of her is a rabbit on 2 legs with gray fur. Gazimon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Mammal. Attack. Electric Stun Blast. The Gazimon over the girl chuckles and says, "I'll have fun with you." It just wants to attack. The girl closes her eyes and awaits the blow that never came. She opens her eyes and sees the blow blocked by a staff. She drives down the staff and sees that Lincoln is holding the staff. He looks at Digimon with cold eyes and says, "Hey, you should go away quickly." The girl nods and runs quickly to the rest of her team. Lincoln uses his strength and throws the Digimon with full force with his bow against the post of the gate. Lincoln takes a few steps back onto the field and says aloud, "Come out." It does not take long before a large amount of Digimon comes on the field. Lincoln counts quickly and counts 25 Digimon, minus the one already defeated and 20 Digimon, which look like a dragon with torn wings. Vajramon. LVL. Champion. Type. Evil Dragon. Attack. Crimson Claw. The whole audience and also the two teams are completely shocked, except for Lynn. She only wonders what Lincoln is doing here. Lincoln looks at the crowd of Digimon and says, "Damn, that's a lot." Lincoln takes out his Digivice and shouts, "Kutamon, Digivolution." Kutamon briefly lights up, but when the light stops, Chirinman stands there. Chirinman looks at Lincoln and says, "Lincoln, you should call the others." Lincoln says, "Good idea." Lincoln lifts up his Digivice and says, "I ask help from my friends, I call the Spartans." The sign of the Spartans lights up briefly as a portal opens. From the portal come Vajramon, Vajramon, Confronting, Confronting, and Digivolution. The entire audience just keeps getting shocked. The Louds are not doing any better, but those who knew about the Digimon are doing better than the others who did not know about Digimon. Rita realizes that some of her daughters are not so shocked and asks, "Lori, Lenny, Luna, Lucy, Lana, Lola, why are not you so shocked?" Lori says, "I know about Digimon, I was accidentally drawn into the world of Digimon." Lucy says, "I and Lenny wanted to apologize and saw Lincoln and Lily go to the digital world, we came with them." Lola says, "We were kidnapped by a Digimon." Luna looks at her sister in shock and says, "Why did not you support me when I talked about this Digimon?" Lynn Sr., who is still recovering from the blow in his face, asks, "Honey, you know those things?" Rita scratches her head and says, "Yeah, I talked to Lincoln and he explained everything to me." Lynn Sr. looks at his wife with disbelief and says, "How can you let happen something like that? I'm his father, I have a right to know about it." Rita rolls her eyes and says, "Please Lynn, we too have not been very good parents to him recently. Confronting or Vajramon are better father figures for Lincoln than you." Luann raises an eyebrow and asks, "Who?" Rita says, "The one with the raven head and the one with the silver helmet." While the Loud family discusses, the Spartans fight against the opposing Digimon. Confronting is more behind because she does not want to fight and just waits for her to heal someone. The fight is actually going pretty well. The Digimon are already half defeated and 3 Vajramon are already defeated. Correction, 4 Vajramon are already defeated. Chirinman has just defeated one more. Chirinman flies just above the enemy mass, but 5 black rays that come out of nowhere hit her. This causes her to fall. Lincoln sees his partner crashes, runs to her and feather her fall by throwing herself under her. That hurt Lincoln a little bit, but he was more concerned that Chirinman was fine. But Chirinman lights up briefly and turns back to Kutamon. Kutamon opens her eyes a bit and says, "L. Lincoln." Lincoln takes Kutamon in his arms and says, "Everything will be alright." Lincoln hears a pounding from the direction where the black rays came and sees 5 more Digimon looking like a big ram and black wings on their backs. Mephistomon. LVL. Ultimate. Type. Fallen Angel. Attack. Black Sabbath. One of the Mephistomon goes to Lincoln and Kutamon. Vajramon notices this and worries about his friend and says, "Lincoln." Just when he wanted to go to them, Vajramon is stopped by another Mephistomon. It says, "I would not do that." Kazimon and Lady Digimon would also like to help, but are stopped by the Dividramon. Confronting and Vajramon are also stopped by the other 3 Mephistomon. Most in the audience expect Lincoln to run away now, but they are shocked when he gets up and glares at the Mephistomon. This seems to shock Mephistomon a bit and asks, "Why did not you run away, human?" Lincoln says, "Because I'm not afraid of someone like you. You hurt my friend and partner, you'll regret it." Mephistomon forms a fist with his hand and wants to punch Lincoln, but just as his fist was about to hit, Lincoln blocks the fist with his arm. But the arm has suffered badly, a big bruise is now visible on the arm. Lincoln looks up at Mephistomon and says, "I will not let you hurt my friends." A red light appears from the digivice of Lincoln, he picks it up and says the words that come to mind, Mega Digivolution. A bright light surrounds Kudamon and she calls out, "Kudamon Mega Digivolution." As the light surrounding Kudamon dissolves, there stands now a kind of centaur with a crossbow on his arm, Kentorosman. Kentorosman. LVL, Mega. Type. Holy Knight. Attack. Inferno Frost. Centaurisman aims her crossbow at Mephistomon and says, "Inferno Frost." An incandescent arrow is fired from the crossbow and hits Mephistomon in the head. It does not take long for the Mephistomon to dissolve into data. This seems to shock the remaining Mephistomon as they turn to Lincoln and Kentorosman. Black Vajramon uses the chance and fires a Terra Destroyer on the Mephistomon that is no longer there after the explosion. Confronting and Vajramon have also destroyed a Mephistomon together. Black Vajramon fires another Terra Destroyer at the penultimate Mephistomon and Kentorosman fires another Inferno Frostfail at the last Mephistomon. It was not long before the last two Mephistomon were destroyed. Meanwhile, Lady Divimon and Kazimon have defeated the last Vajramon. And the Gazimon were destroyed by unhit attacks. When the fight was over, Lincoln smiles, but collapses and holds his arm that has the bruise. Lady Divimon, Kazimon and Kudamon run to Lincoln and say, "Lincoln." Lincoln waves, smiles weird, and says, "I'm fine, my arm just hurts." It does not take long for three more voices to say, "Lincoln." Lincoln looks in the direction of the voices and sees Stella, Girl Jordan and Haiku. The three girls come running to Lincoln and Stella says, "Lincoln, we're so sorry we're so late." Lincoln smiles and says, "It's okay, girl." Haiku sees his injured arm and says, "Lincoln, your arm." Lincoln says, "It just hurts a bit." Lincoln tries to get up but breaks down again. Vajramon says, "We should take him back to the house, where we can take care of him." The rest of the Spartans and the girls nod in agreement. Confronting raises Lincoln and everyone makes their way to the portal. Lynn snaps out of her shock and says angrily, "Stinkin'. Come back." Lynn tries to run after them, but does not make it in time as the portal closes. Lynn screams in frustration and skin the floor screaming, "You stupid, bad, ugly, excuse of a brother." Lynn Sr. looks at his wife and asks, "Where did these monsters go with my son?" Exclamation mark quote. Lucy says, "If I could guess, I would say, into the digital world." Lynn hears that and says, "How do I get there, you goth freak?" Lucy flinches under the anger of her big sister and says, "You cannot, you need a digivice, which none of us has." Lucy notices a couple in the family looking confused and says, "The thing Lincoln has hanging on his belt." Lynn storms off. Luna wants to follow her, but is stopped by Rita who says, "I think we should leave her alone." Lynn disappears into an alley and says, "Stupid brother, I'll destroy you, and your bad luck." A black portal opens under Lynn and she falls into it. When Lynn opens her eyes she sees that she is in a black world and she seems to float. A dark laugh sounds and a voice that says, "Want revenge?" Lynn smiles and says, "Yes." A kind of 12-sided cube appears with claws coming out of the cube. A person is standing on the upper surface. The person looks like a blue-skinned humanoid wearing a black cape with red trimming, a gray helmet with yellow markings, and a scar on his left eye. His arms are long with black bands on his forearms and his hands are larger than normal hands and have red claws. His hair is a dirty white, and it has yellow eyes. Apocalypse. LVL, Mega. Type. Unidentified. Attack. Darkness Zone. The Digimon says, "I'm Apocalypse and I think I can help you." Chapter 41. Lincoln is being healed by Cutemon as he tells Sakuyamon, Lilimon and Sister Mont Blanc about the events. The three are just as scared of Lincoln as the other girls who fell in love with him. The three were very shocked when they saw a just barely awake Lincoln in the arms of Confronting. Cutemon has just completely cured Lincoln's arm and says, "So your arm is healed." Lincoln moves his arm a bit and feels no pain. He smiles and says, "Thank you, Cutemon." Cuteman gives him a peace sign and says, no problem. The girls who love Lincoln look at each other and nod to each other. Sakuyaman asks, Vajramon, Karatanman, and Cuteman, could you just step out of the room, we need to talk to Lincoln. The mentioned Digimon look at each other and do not mind, as they all shrug their shoulders and go out of the room. In the room are now only Lincoln, Stella, Girl Jordan, Haiku, Lady Digivolution, Queen Chessmon, Kazimon, Sakuyaman, Sistermon Blanc and Lilimon. Lincoln asks, so, what do you have to talk to me about? The girls seem to be nervous. Stella is the first to get her courage together and says, Lincoln, we talked together and we want to tell you that we all love you. This shocks Lincoln as he looks at the other girls with a questioning look, but the looks on the girls' faces make him realize that they are serious. Lincoln asks, you really love me? The girls nod and Lincoln asks, are you really ready to share me? The girls are nodding again. Lincoln sighs and says, girls, I'd be lying if I said I did not feel anything for you. The girls look up with hope, but Lincoln says, but are you sure I can make you happy? Haiku is the first one who says, Lincoln, since that one night I cannot get you out of my head, I want you to become my king of the night. Lincoln smiles at Haiku and she smiles back. Queen Chessmon is the next to say, Lincoln, without you I would still sleep. You freed me from this curse and gave me back my life, I want you to become my king. Stella is the next one to say, since the first day I came to this school, you've helped me, I want to be with you Lincoln. Girl Jordan is next, Lincoln, we've known each other since kindergarten, I love you. Kazimon is next, I never expected anyone to stop and ask how I'm doing, just because he wanted to know, Lincoln, I love you too. Lady Digivolution is next, you saved me then, since then I love you. Sakuyaman is next, you have always been very nice and have always visited me at the temple, I would like to be with you forever. Lilimon and Blanc are the next, Lincoln, you helped us out in the garden so many times and also recommended us, we love you. All girls ask at the same time, so, do you accept us? Lincoln just smiles as he gets up and gives each of the girls a passionate kiss, with tongue. He asks, is that enough for an answer? The girls say in a dreamy voice, yes. The beautiful moment was destroyed by Vajramon when he opens the door and says, Lincoln, you should come out quickly. Lincoln notices this concern in Vajramon's voice and follows him outside. When Lincoln arrived outside he saw a giant blue dragon in the sky, a red bird, a two-headed turtle with a huge tree on its back and a white tiger with blue stripes. The rest of the Spartans is outside too. The blue dragon says, Vajramon, I see you have found your purpose in life. Vajramon says, not seen for a long time Azulongmon, yes I have found my purpose. Lincoln walks beside Vajramon and asks, you know him? The dragon says, young man, I'm Azulongmon, one of the 4 sacred mega-level Digimon. The bird says, I am Zuchowman, also one of the 4 sacred mega-level Digimon. The turtle says, I am Ebonwoman, also one of the 4 sacred mega-level Digimon. The tiger says, I am Baihuman, the last of the 4 sacred mega-level Digimon. Lincoln says, I do not want to sound disrespectful because you sound like important people, but why are you here? Azulongmon says, we're here because we've been watching you for a long time, Lincoln. Lincoln raises an eyebrow as Baihuman says, we've been thinking for a long time. Ebonwoman continues, and we decided that you would get a gift from us. A shining orb flies from Azulongmon to Lincoln and invades his chest. Lincoln feels his chest but does not notice any change. He asks, what exactly is the gift? Zuchowman says, you'll find out. And fly away. The other Mega Levels Digimon follow his example and disappear, but Azulongmon still says, see you again someday young man. Lincoln turns to the other confused, but smiles and says, do we want to party? The other voice closed, but just as they were on their way back into the house, a dark portal opens up below the group. All fall into the unknown and even the ones that can fly could not flee the portal. Lincoln and the others find themselves in a dark world and he asks, is everyone alright? He gets a lot of yes back and looks around. The world seems to be calm until a dark laugh fills the empty space. It does not take long for a Pokémon to appear, but it shocks Lincoln when he sees who stands next to a Pokémon, his sister Lynn. He asks, Lynn, what are you doing? Lynn points to him and says, I'm going to wipe you out with the help of a Pokémon. Stella asks, a Pokémon? Apocalypse raises a hand and says, "That's me." Haiku asks her partner, Doraemon, "Do you know this Digimon?" Doraemon. LVL. Rookie. Type. Beast. Attack. Metal. Doraemon shakes his head and says, "No, I do not know this Digimon." Girl Jordan asks, "Any one of you?" Everyone is shaking their heads. That seems to upset Apocalypse when he says, "I'll just wipe you out, Darkness Zone." Even before Lincoln or one of his friends can do something, they are dissolved. Lincoln wakes up in a white world where the numbers 1 and 0 fly from time to time. He looks around and says, "Is this the end?" He hears the voices of the people who are important to him and tell him not to give up. The voices of his friends he made in the digital world, the voice of his partners and the voices of his girlfriends. Gradually, his friends appear again in front of him and Kudamon on his shoulder. Everyone has a smile on their face as Lincoln says, "Kudamon, Mega Digivolution." Kudamon transforms into Kentorosman. Stella says, "Leormon Digivolution." Leormon transforms into Leomon. Girl Jordan is the next one who says, "Terriermon Digivolution." Terriermon lights up and says, "Terriermon Digivolution to Gargomon." Haiku is the last one who says, "Doraemon Digivolution." Doraemon starts to shine and says, "Doram Digivolution to Dorugamon." Haiku notices Lincoln and says, "My love, your chest." Lincoln looks at his chest and sees that a bright flash comes out of his chest. Lincoln wonders what's going on until a few specific words come into his mind. His expression gets serious and he says, "Digivolution." Lincoln says, "Lincoln Warp Digivolution 2." Lincoln's body gets bigger and armor appears on his body, White Vajramon. All friends of Lincoln are completely stunned that Lincoln has just completed a Digivolution. Lady Digivolution asks, "Lincoln, how did you do that?" Lincoln says, "I think that was the gift I got from Azulongmon. We can take care of it later, now we have to get started with Apocalypse." A light comes from the Digivice of Lincoln, Stella, Girl Jordan and Haiku. The light becomes so garish that Lincoln and his friends are blinded. When they open their eyes again, they realize that they are back in this dark world and Apocalypse and Lynn look at them in shock. Apocalypse says, "How did you do that? I destroyed you." Girl Jordan says, "Never underestimate the power of friendship and love." Lincoln points to him and says, "Exactly, you'll regret that you wanted to hurt those who are important to me." Lynn says to Apocalypse, "I thought you destroyed them. You're useless." Apocalypse grabs Lynn and says, "Shut up, you brat." He throws Lynn as she flies off into the empty. Apocalypse turns to Lincoln and says, "I do not know how you got under a Digivolution, but that will not help you." Lincoln says, "Let's see Apocalypse." Lincoln turns to the other and says, "Come, let's defeat him." When he said that, he got some yes from his friends with complete determination. Lincoln smiles and says, "Let's go." What surprised everyone is that Cutemon makes the beginning by saying, "Ultrasonic Song." Cutemon sings in a very high frequency that makes Apocalypse hold his head. Karadenman is the next attacker when he says, "Feather Flare." He flies closer to Apocalypse, flaps his jet black wings and sends a bunch of feathers towards Apocalypse. Lady Digivolution is the next one to attack. She says, "Darkness Wave." She sends a group of bats in the direction of Apocalypse. Lilymon attacks by saying, "Lila Shower." She fires countless rays from her fingers towards Apocalypse. Queen Chessmon attacks next and says, "Grand Cricket." She throws her hammer at Apocalypse who is hit in the middle of the head. Sakuyamon attacks next and says, "Amethyst Wind." She unleashes a storm of cherry blossoms on Apocalypse. Sister Mont Blanc is the next one who attacks and says, "Divine Pierce." She conjures a trident and throws him in the direction of Apocalypse. The trident hits the belly of Apocalypse and pierces him. Vajramon is the next one by saying, "Diva Blade." He crosses his swords and sends a beam towards Apocalypse. Stella says, "Let's go Leomon." Leomon nods and says, "Thunder of King." He sends a wave of electricity to Apocalypse. Haiku says, "You can do it, Durogamon." Durogamon says, "Cannonball." He fires an iron ball at Apocalypse. Girl Jordan is the next one by saying, "Come on, Gargomon." Gargomon targets and says, "Gargo Pellets." He fires both weapons at his hands and hits Apocalypse very hard. Kentorosman is next, she says, icy breath. She aims the crossbow and fires an ice arrow that blasts into a big blizzard. Black Wargreymon looks at Lincoln and says, Lincoln, are you ready? Lincoln nods and says, always. Black Wargreymon says, then let's go. Black Wargreymon charges a Terra Destroyer and Lincoln does the same. Both say, double Terra Destroyer. They fire the spheres that connect in the middle of the way and a huge explosion takes place on impact. Apocalypse begins to disappear and says, that cannot be true. Not again. Apocalypse looks at the friends with hate and says, I'll destroy you. But before he can make another attack, he has completely dissolved. A bright light dazzles the Spartans and when Lincoln comes to himself, he is human again and is in a sort of corridor. When he looks to the left, he sees his friends from the digital world and Stella, Jordan, and Haiku. When he looks to the right, he sees his family. Lynn is also there but she seems angry. He asks, what is this? Azulongmon appears out of nowhere and says, when Apocalypse was destroyed, he made one more thing. Lincoln asks, what? Azulongmon explains, he has closed the door to the digital world and the human world, but you can still choose where you want to live. One day the gate will open again, but we do not know when. Lincoln looks left and right, but then asks, what about Haiku, Stella and Jordan? Azulongmon says, they have chosen the digital world. Lincoln turns to his family and says, I'm sorry, but I'll go to my friends and girlfriends. Lincoln turns around and heads toward the digital world. He thinks to himself, I have experienced many adventures, I have found love and best friends, I will not give that up. Because the Digimon have changed my life. The end. This is the end of this What If movie. I hope you guys like it. Don't forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to my channel.